LoveLore Library. Chapter 13. If you can't raise a son, at least you had a daughter before. If your daughter isn't even yours, you have to think about it yourself. There are 3 ways to be unfilial, and the worst is to have no descendants. You broke off Qin Meng's descendants, so you committed the 7 ways. Even if Qin Meng divorced you, your father and I would have nothing to say. Sun Clan was stunned by Duchess Ding's words. After a while, she screamed sharply, He won't. He won't dare to divorce me. He won't dare. Duchess Ding sneered. Looking at her daughter's stupid look, she was so angry that her head hurt. What kind of person is Qin Meng? That was an extremely talented and decisive person. At a young age, he was able to use tricks to get rid of the original Beiji Protector General. Later, he had a meteoric rise in his official career. Have you ever seen anyone in our Dian dynasty who entered the cabinet at such a young age? Hearing this, Sun Clan shook her head blankly. In her memory, there was indeed no man who had a smoother official career than Qin Huayuan. However, Sun Clan was still unconvinced. That's also thanks to my father's promotion, idiot. Duchess Ding pushed her daughter's forehead hard, and Sun Clan fell to the ground. Our family and family Qin are in-laws, so it's natural for us to mutually benefit and complement each other. If you always talk to the son-in-law in such a superior tone, not to mention the son-in-law, even I will be annoyed to hear it. The son-in-law is an upright person. Is it worthwhile for him to not even dare to bring back a mistress? Sun Clan's lips trembled. Thinking of all kinds of things after seeing Qin eating today, she murmured, Is Sister Yi really my child? Was Sister Hui really exchanged? Duchess Ding, who was originally in a rage, saw her daughter's sad appearance, and her heart softened. Her tone was much softer than before. Since young master has said so, then the matter should be 80 to 90% accurate. Moreover, no matter who gave birth to the child, you have to acknowledge it, and you have to acknowledge it with joy. If you don't acknowledge her, you will become a sinful woman who has no children. If you acknowledge her, you will have another daughter and another layer of support. Do you need me to teach you such a simple truth? Sun Clan's daughter's tears fell like beads again. She stammered, I've raised Sister Hui for so many years. How could she become a fake? It's all Qin Meng's fault. If it wasn't for the fact that he had offended someone outside, how could the child have been swapped when he was still an infant? When you married Qin Meng and were popular, why didn't you thank him? Shouldn't husband and wife share weal and woe together? Duchess Ding's mood, which had just eased a little, was wiped out by Madame Sun's ungrateful attitude. Madame Sun was taken aback. Then, she put on a strong front and said, Anyway, he's in the wrong. Is it because in your heart, everyone can't stand you? You don't have to tell me this. Just tell me, what are you going to do next? Duchess Ding rubbed her eyebrows helplessly. Sun Clan's daughter thought for a moment and said, Mother, why don't we secretly take some of that girl's blood and don't let anyone know that I once did a blood test with her? You see, at this time, we don't even need to test. Didn't I just say it? I've said so much. Was it all in vain? Duchess Ding shrieked. Sun Clan's daughter was so frightened by her mother's rage that she shivered and lowered her head. You should know the situation in Dian now. Your father, brother, and I have analyzed it more than once. Dizhou is getting more and more prosperous. Emperor Zhou is cunning, and Peng Zhishi is tyrannical and unrestrained. Our Dian is declining day by day. I'm afraid that we won't have a good future. At this time, it's time for our Duke Ding's mansion to cooperate with the family Qin. Our family and the family Qin can't have the slightest hostility. When it came to this serious national situation, even the Sun Clan's face became solemn. The tiger army led by little Wang Yi was like a sharp blade that was inserted into people's stomachs and was still stirring. They were stirring so much pain that they wished they were dead. It was as if every breath was waiting for the sentence of death. Sun Clan's daughter felt that her hands and feet were cold. Compared with the destruction of the country and the destruction of the family, she didn't feel that the sky was falling down when the child was swapped and found. Seeing that her daughter had finally calmed down a little, Duchess Ding also felt a lot better. She said in a slightly relaxed tone, "You should believe in Qin Meng's character. Maybe he will use tricks for other things, but when it comes to his own children and the bloodline of his family Qin, he will not allow things to be mixed up. You really shouldn't have questioned him today." Sun Clan's daughter thought of Qin Huayuan's flushed face and couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Duchess Ding said again, "Sister Han, think about it carefully. Now that you have found your biological daughter, you have a sister Hui who has been raised for 14 years. If you have a daughter out of thin air, it's equivalent to having a good son-in-law in the future. Isn't it one more thing to rely on? For such a good thing, do you think it's better to have one or two?" Sun Clan's daughter thought for a while and finally nodded obediently. Duchess Ding breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that she was finally no longer stubborn. In the face of her daughter, who was nearly 40 years old, she had to break down the truth. It was more tiring than taking care of her granddaughter. She could help the Sun Clan plan, but she couldn't accompany her for the rest of her life. Sun Clan's daughter was so old, but she was still so ignorant. What would she do in the future? Mama Bao understood Duchess Ding's wife's melancholy. Seeing that the matter had been discussed, she came forward and said with a smile, "My dear aunt, you must be tired today. I have already asked someone to prepare the courtyard where you used to live. You should wash up and rest first. How about we talk about the rest tomorrow?" Mama Bao was Duchess Ding's dowry. She had a high status among the servants in Duke Ding's mansion. Even the Sun Clan had to be polite to her. When Madame Sun heard this, she smiled gratefully at Mama Bao. Then, she looked at her mother, whose expression had turned ugly because of her anger. Madame Sun said shyly, "Mother, don't be angry. Your daughter will listen to everything you say." Duchess Ding shook her head helplessly and ordered Mama Bao, "Ask someone to send the ointment to Sister Han later." Then she said to Sun Clan, "You should also think of an excuse carefully. Go back to your house tomorrow and explain it to your mother-in-law. What's there to think about? I will say that Qin Meng bullied me." Sun Clan's daughter snorted. Duchess Ding had the urge to hold her forehead again. "How can you say that in front of your mother-in-law? If I were your mother-in-law, I would make you cry. You can say that I was not feeling well and rush back to take care of the sick without telling my mother-in-law. I came here at night." Sun Clan's daughter said unhappily, "How can I do that? Mother, you are not sick. How can you talk nonsense like that? Besides, the matter of me coming out is big. The second branch and the third branch should know by now. They will know that I am looking for an excuse if I say that. This stupid girl let the matter spread out." Duchess Ding felt that if she talked to Sun Clan again, her life would be shortened by at least 10 years. Fortunately, she waved her hand and shooed her away like a fly. "Go and rest. We can talk about the rest tomorrow." Sun Clan's daughter saw that Duchess Ding was really annoyed, so she didn't dare to continue to pester her and obediently left. Mama Bao instructed Mother Jean and Kai Lan to serve her carefully and watched her leave before returning to the house. Seeing Duchess Ding's tired look, she smiled and advised, "Madam, don't take it to heart. I've made a lot more progress than before. It's just that this matter involves children. Don't women care about their children the most? It's pardonable for me to do this. As parents, they naturally favored their children." Even if Duchess Ding felt that Sun Clan's daughter was really reckless and brainless, she felt warm in her heart when she heard Mama Bao's words. Sister Han is true to her nature. She has been like this since she was young. I just don't know if the family Qin people will think so. Speaking of this, madam, you don't have to worry about it. Mama Bao smiled and handed the exquisite white porcelain teacup to Duchess Ding. Look, our grandaunt has been married for so many years, but she is still so honest. It's enough to see that the son-in-law has protected her very well. Even the old madam of the family Qin is tolerant and gentle to her daughter-in-law. Otherwise, with grandaunt's intelligence, if there were really so many fights in the harem to train her, wouldn't she have become a master long ago? It seems that naivety has its advantages. At least it shows that grandaunt hasn't suffered much. Mama Bao was indeed the most capable person around Duchess Ding. After hearing her words, Duchess Ding felt as comfortable as if she had eaten a ginseng fruit, and the anger she had just felt dissipated. Duchess Ding thought carefully and said, I still need you to go with her tomorrow. Sister Han is wrong. Our family is not a family without rules. We can't not express our position completely. We also need to let the family Qin people see our sincerity. You go and explain it to Madam carefully and take a look at the two children by the way. Mama Bao nodded cautiously. I understand. Also, tomorrow you go and find out what happened in the Prime Minister's manor after Sister Yi came back. Pay attention to the reactions of Sister Hui and Sister Yi. Come back to me tomorrow when you have a clear discussion. I can also think of a way for Sister Han. Yes. Mama Bao's expression turned cold, and she knew what to do. Qin Yining was used to getting up early. She got up before dawn. After washing and changing clothes, she tucked her skirt into a towel and ran around the yard. Last night, Yu Xiang was punished to boil water. She didn't sleep until midnight. Ruelan endured the pain and served Qin Yining until midnight. They thought that the girl would be sleepy and couldn't get up today. Who would have thought that as soon as they got up, they saw the girl running around in the yard? How could a girl from a noble family get up in the morning like this? Ruelan didn't dare to delay. She hurriedly wiped her face, put on her clothes, and came out. She saw Qiu Lu holding a honey-colored cloak and waiting in the corridor. She smiled and asked in a low voice, when did the girl get up? I've been running for about 2 hours. 2 hours. Ruelan carefully looked at Qin Yining. She found that her face was only slightly red, and even her breathing didn't change. She couldn't help but be shocked. This girl's physical strength was completely different from that of ordinary girls from noble families. After Qin Yining's exercise, her body was finally relaxed and tired. Seeing that it was about time, she asked Ruelan and Qiu Lu to help her dress up. Later, I will go to Xia Shao Garden to pay my respects to old madam. Ruelan and Qiu Lu looked at each other and were a little nervous. Chapter 14. Snow Pear Courtyard was located in the northwest corner of the Prime Minister's residence. To put it nicely, it was quiet and elegant, but in reality, there were few people there. It was located in a remote area and was far away from other places. Compared to the other girls, they had to walk a lot more to get to old madam's place. Qin Yining brought Qiu Lu and Ruelan out of the courtyard. Zhu Mama, Luya, and the maidservants respectfully sent them off. Ruelan smiled flatteringly, Miss, do you want me to instruct a few servants to prepare a small sedan chair? It's still a long way to go, I'm afraid you're tired. She thought that Qin Yining had run for 2 hours straight after waking up, so she probably had no strength left. There's no need. The morning air is good and I can loosen my muscles and bones. Otherwise, I feel uncomfortable all over. Compared to her previous self-sufficient life on the mountain, Qin Yining's recent days were too comfortable. She was used to the days where she would starve to death if she didn't work today. She was really afraid that her willpower would be worn away by this kind of life. Everyone couldn't help but click their tongues. If it were them, they would be exhausted already. This person actually complained that her muscles and bones weren't even loosened. How good was her physical strength? Lu Ye reacted and immediately went forward to praise Qin Yining's physical strength along with Ruelan. It was as if they wanted to describe Qin Yining as a female warrior who had the strength to pick up a mountain. Even Qiu Lu, who wasn't good with words, looked at Qin Yining with admiration. Qin Yining only smiled when she heard it. Compared to yesterday's disrespect, the attitude of the servants today was like heaven and earth. It was obvious that her fame in one battle wasn't in vain. This was exactly what Qin Yining wanted. Since gentleness and understanding couldn't be exchanged for the love she deserved, she could only draw her sword. Otherwise, everyone would think that she was a pushover and could trample on her as they wished. How could a legitimate daughter who didn't even have the ability to protect herself be followed by others without worry? Without subordinates, it was equivalent to not having any eyes and ears. How could she survive in such a large residence? The current situation was a good start for her. Qin Yining relaxed and led Ruelan and Qiu Lu to Xia Shao Garden. The morning air was cold and fresh, and there was a lot more smoke and fire than in the mountains. Compared to the desolation, Qin Yining really liked this place, which could be called home. As he walked, he admired his surroundings. Even the slightly mossy stone bricks were interesting. Seeing that Qin Yining was in a good mood, Ruelan thought for a moment. She came closer and whispered, "Miss, Yuxiang boiled water until midnight yesterday. She even said that she would complain about you to old madam. You should be more careful. Don't let her frame you." Qin Yining nodded with a smile. He didn't say anything, but he seemed to have taken Ruelan's words seriously. Seeing this, Ruelan couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that the young lady didn't intend to pursue her mistakes. Only such a tolerant and courageous master could make people feel safe. Following the alley, they turned right at a fork in the road. The scenery in front of them suddenly widened. They walked forward and soon arrived at the back garden. Qin Yining couldn't help but slow down. She looked at the scenery in the courtyard with interest. She had seen a lot of wild mountains and fields, and she admired such a man-made and ingenious garden very much. Just as she was feeling happy, a slightly childish and sharp female voice came from behind her. "Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it was you. I didn't think that a barbarian like you would appreciate gardens." Hearing the voice, Qin Yining turned around and gathered her hair that had been blown by the wind. She looked at the speaker with a smile in her beautiful eyes. She didn't immediately respond. The person who came was a young girl with a round face. Just like her, her hair was combed into two flat buns, with two silver butterflies in her hair. She was also wearing a pink and white peony palace flower. Her silver-red dress and collar were complemented by the white rabbit fur, making her apple-like face look very cute. She looked like a plum blossom that suddenly bloomed in the dark winter, making people's eyes light up. Ruelan guessed that Qin Yining didn't recognize the young lady in the foo. She immediately saluted and said, "Sixth young lady, nice to meet you." Qin Yining raised her eyebrows when she heard that it was the sixth young lady. Last night, when she was copying books, she had Ruelan take care of the brush and ink. She also asked about the situation of the people in the foo. The sixth young lady's name was Shuangning. Her birth mother was the second master's favorite concubine, Concubine Lin. Concubine Lin was very lucky. She gave birth to twins in one pregnancy. The sixth young lady, Qin Shuangning, was a little older. She had a younger sister who was less than a quarter of an hour younger than her. Her name was Ning. Although the sixth young lady and the seventh young lady were twins, their appearances and temperaments were completely different. The sixth young lady was very close to Qin Yining. She was very dependent on her birth mother, Concubine Lin. The seventh young lady, on the other hand, was very close to the third young lady and the eighth young lady of the third branch. She was even taught under the second madam's name. The second madam gave birth to the eldest son, Qin Yu, and the fifth son, Qin Xian. She didn't have a biological daughter. The seventh young lady was taught under her name. Naturally, she was treated like a legitimate daughter. Ruilan talked about this and praised the second madam for being virtuous. However, Qin Yining felt that if the second madam was really virtuous, why would she lift up one of concubine Lin's daughters and suppress the other? She could teach the one in her hands at will. Not to mention how she would turn out, the one she suppressed would be unfairly treated and would be full of grievances. In this way, at least the sisters would be at odds with each other. Seeing that her twin daughters were at odds with each other and that one was not close to her, concubine Lin was the most upset. In terms of stirring up trouble, the second madam was really an expert. Qin Yining smiled and said, "So it's sixth younger sister. You're also going to greet the old madam?" "Yes. Of course I'm going to greet the old madam. I also want to see how my fourth sister is doing. I didn't expect to meet a wild hussy like you on the way. It's really bad luck." The sixth young lady snorted with her nose up. Qin Yining's eyes turned cold, but his voice was very gentle. "I didn't expect that you city people would greet each other like this. You've really opened my eyes." The sixth young lady saw the contempt in Qin Yining's eyes and immediately became angry. "You don't need to be so proud. Look at your domineering appearance. You dared to hit people on the first day you returned home. You even dared to hit my fourth sister. Just wait for grandmother's punishment." Qin Yining smiled slightly. "Sixth young lady, are you talking about Qin Huining? It seems that you're not well informed. Speaking of punishment, grandmother already did it yesterday. Qin Huining provoked the harmony between my father and mother, which made grandmother very angry. She was already punished to copy the Book of Filial Piety." "You." "Nonsense." The sixth young lady was so angry that she stomped her feet. "You're distorting the truth. I think sixth sister is still young, but she's confused." Before Qin Yining could speak, three young ladies walked out from the corner. The one who spoke was the eighth young lady, Qin Yining. Her crisp voice came out of nowhere. Then, she flew over like a nimble swallow. She bent her knees to salute Qin Yining while glaring at the sixth young lady. "Yesterday, eldest uncle just said that Qin Huining is only an adopted daughter. Now that fourth sister is in the genealogy, you still call her by the wrong name. You can't even tell which one is your fourth sister. Be careful, eldest uncle and old madam will punish you if they find out." Upon hearing this, the sixth young lady's eyes turned red with anger. She said in a shrill voice, "Qin Bowning, you're too heartless. This wild hussy just came back and you don't recognize fourth sister anymore. According to the news I got, she even beat up fourth sister. We've been sisters for so many years. Don't you care about fourth sister?" "I care about her. What I care about is why Qin Huining asked for a beating. Since she asked for a beating, it's naturally her fault." As the eighth young lady said this, she rolled her eyes at the sixth young lady. She wanted to continue mocking her, but the third young lady, Qin Jianing, secretly pulled her back. Only then did she shut her mouth. Seeing that the situation was about to get out of hand, the seventh young lady, Qin Anning, who had been silent, quickly stepped forward and took her sister's arm. She said with a smile, "Sixth sister, let's go and pay respects to grandmother first. Don't delay the time." The sixth young lady pushed her twin sister away and said disdainfully, Okay. You can stay away from me. I don't want to talk to a traitor like you. Don't you usually like to hug the thighs of the third branch? Why are you pretending to be a good person now?" As she said this, she shook off Qin Anning's hand and left. The seventh young lady's face turned red. Although the third old master, Wang, was born of a concubine and had no achievements in his official career, he was successful in business. Therefore, the third branch was the economic pillar of the family. Even the children of the third branch didn't rely on the public money. The young ladies and young men of the third branch were naturally different from the young ladies who relied on monthly allowances. The seventh young lady had indeed received some small gifts. Now that she had lost face, how could she not be angry? She immediately said angrily, "If that's the case, haven't you always hugged the thighs of the eldest branch? You even hugged a fake one." When the eighth young lady heard this, she clapped her hands and laughed. The sixth young lady was so angry that she turned around and glared at everyone. In the end, she felt that she couldn't gain any advantage and finally left. After she left, the third young lady held Qin Yining's hand and said, "Fourth sister, don't be offended. Shuang Jia has always played with Huining Mississippi. This time, she was just being impulsive. Third sister is right. Sixth sister is naive and unaffected, but she is also very interesting." Qin Yining smiled. Every time she was in a new environment, whether it was deep in the mountains or with a crowd, Qin Yining always liked to carefully observe the environment and analyze the people and things around her. Only by understanding her surroundings could she feel safe. Now, she had a general understanding of the sisters in the Fu. Seeing that Qin Yining didn't show her emotions and didn't treat others as bashfully as yesterday, it was as if she had suddenly opened up a lot. The third young lady couldn't help but treat Qin Yining more seriously. The sisters chatted along the way, and it didn't take long for them to reach Ci Shao Garden. Just as they passed through the hall and stepped on the square bricks in the courtyard, the young maidservants serving under the porch uniformly curtsied to greet them. Two maidservants, one on the left and one on the right, pulled up the beautiful warm curtain made of bamboo. A pair of green jade gourds were hanging at the corners of the curtain, and the light blue tassels on the corners swayed beautifully. Today's warm curtain was different from yesterday's. As Qin Yining sighed at the luxurious lifestyle of the rich, she took off her cloak and handed it to the maidservants to put away. Then, she followed the crowd around the screen that was beaming with joy and entered the inner room. Today, the old madam was wearing a sapphire blue wide-sleeved jacket embroidered with longevity patterns. Her white hair was tied up in a bun with a gold and ruby hairpin inserted diagonally. At this time, she was sitting cross-legged on the arhat bed by the window with a gloomy expression. Second Madam Su Shi and Third Madam Wang Shi accompanied her as they sat on her left and right. Eldest Madam Yao Clan and Second Madam Meng Shi stood behind their respective mothers-in-law with their heads bowed. In the middle of them was Qin Yining, whose face was half swollen like a pig's head. When she saw Qin Yining's pupils shrank and she couldn't help but tremble. She bit her lip and had a pitiful appearance of being wronged but not daring to resist. She only felt that her face was burning, and she was very indignant. Looking at Qin Huining's red and swollen face, she only felt that the two sisters were in the same boat. They had both been cheated by Qin Yining, and she really hated Qin Huining in her heart. Qin Yining, 3rd Miss, 7th Miss, and 8th Miss all came forward to pay their respects to Old Madam. Old Madam had been silent all this time, like a Maitreya Buddha. Only now did she raise her eyelids. First, she glanced at 6th young lady, and then lightly waved her hand to signal everyone to stand up. Qin Yining followed 3rd Miss and the others to stand to the side. The atmosphere in the room was slightly stagnant. After all, such a big incident had happened in the eldest branch last night. First, there was the news that eldest Madam and Prime Minister had quarreled and then returned to her maternal home. Just as everyone was guessing why they had quarreled, there was the news that Qin Huining had been violently beaten by Qin Yining. Compared to the previous news, the latter could be considered an earth-shattering rumor in the inner residence. The Prime Minister's manner was passed down from generation to generation. Even if the young men had a conflict, they wouldn't fight, not to mention that the one who had beaten them was a young lady. Now, there were many versions of rumors in the manor. Some said that Qin Yining was a barbarian and had a wild nature. Others said that Qin Huining had taken the initiative to provoke them because he couldn't accept that his daughter had returned and stepped on his head. In short, no matter who these rumors were beneficial to, they had undoubtedly stirred up the waters of the Prime Minister's manor and made the servants laugh at the master's family. When the rumors spread, it also gave outsiders something to chew on. The Dowager Madam recalled what Qin Huayuan had hurriedly said to her early in the morning: "This matter must be resolved as soon as possible. His Majesty is getting old, and what he dislikes the most is to see this kind of thing happen in the official's manor. Not to mention, he's already too busy with court affairs. Mother, you must let people know that our family is harmonious and harmonious. Besides, if we don't clean up one house, how can we clean up the world? If this matter is caught by my son's political enemies, the consequences will be unimaginable." Thinking of this, the Dowager Madam's face was as heavy as water. She only wanted to resolve this matter quickly. There must have been rumors outside, but no matter how they were spread, she couldn't let Qin Huayuan's flesh and blood bear this infamy. Otherwise, wouldn't it give Qin Huayuan's political enemies an excuse to attack him? If he didn't teach and protect well, then it was because he was incompetent as a father. If the upper beam wasn't straight, then the lower beam would be crooked. Wouldn't Qin Huayuan's moral quality be questioned? She cried again and again, looking exceptionally miserable. Sixth young mistress was anxious and distressed when she saw her. She wanted to comfort her, but just as she was about to take a step, she was glared at by second Furen. She didn't have the courage to challenge her mother. After hesitating, she still lowered her head and didn't move. Seeing everyone's reaction like this, the Dowager Madam couldn't help but rub her forehead in irritation. Her life had been smooth these past few years. It had been a long time since she used so many brains like when she was young. However, Mammy Qin understood the Dowager Madam's temper the best. She timely served a bowl of black tea of a suitable temperature. The exquisite gold-plated tea bowl was the Dowager Madam's favorite. The tea was fragrant and there was honey in it. It was sweet and fragrant when it entered the mouth. It warmed the belly and diluted the displeasure from just now. Just at this time, a sharp cry came from outside. Listening carefully, it was a young girl shouting, asking the Dowager Madam to make a decision. Qin Yining felt that the voice was very familiar. She had an excellent memory. Although the voice was broken from shouting, she could still recognize that the person outside was Yu Xiang. Sure enough, this person did as she said. She actually came to the Dowager Madam to complain. The Dowager Madam frowned and put the tea bowl heavily on the table. "Who is outside? What's with all the noise?" Mammy Qin hurriedly walked out and lifted the warm curtain. She saw a maidservant with messy hair and a dirty face being pulled by two little maidservants. She was sobbing sadly and timidly. Seeing Mammy Qin come out, the maidservants outside all breathed a sigh of relief. The little maidservant cleverly came forward and whispered. Yu Xiang from Snow Pear Courtyard broke in. She said that she has something to ask the Dowager Madam to make a decision. If she wants to make a decision, then let her make a decision. Even if she wants to make a decision, it depends on whether the Dowager Madam has the time to pay attention to it. You're making such a big fuss and disturbing the Dowager Madam. Can you bear the responsibility? Mammy Qin had accumulated a lot of power in the Fu. However, seeing Mammy Qin turn around and return to the room, and thinking that she was at least a servant's child and that her parents, who were in charge of the outer courtyard, could make a decision, Yu Xiang inexplicably regained her confidence. When the dowager madam heard Mammy Chin's whisper, her face became gloomy. What is this person like? Bring her in and let me see. Ruelon and Chiu Lu, who were waiting outside, heard the noise and were already anxiously pacing around. When they saw Yu Xiang come in, Chiu Lu was stunned. Ruelon frowned and felt that things were not good. Yu Xiang came in and saw Ruelon. She first raised her eyebrows and proudly pulled the corners of her mouth. Then, without waiting for Ruelon to react, she grabbed her hand. Her tears seemed to have turned on a switch and fell down. She cried and complained, "Sister is also here. You were tortured like that last night, and you still have to endure the pain today." The dowager madam is benevolent and has never mistreated the servants. Let's go and ask the dowager madam to make a decision. As she spoke, she forcefully pulled her into the room. Ruelon was caught off guard and was dragged into the inner room. She struggled to shake off Yu Xiang's hand. Looking at the masters in the room who were surrounded by pearls and jade, and then meeting Qin Yining's calm gaze, she was so scared that she almost cried. In all honesty, she really didn't want to come and complain. However, Yu Xiang had already knelt down and kowtowed. 2 streaks of tears appeared on her dirty face. She looked so bleak as if she had just returned from exile. This servant, Yu Xiang, is a second-class servant girl who just went to Snow Pear Courtyard. Today, I risked my life to come here and ask the dowager madam to make a decision and give me justice. As she spoke, she kowtowed. Chapter 16. Old Madam's reprimand caused everyone to look at Qin Yining at the same time. The maidservants in Snow Pear Courtyard were arranged by the Sun Clan's mother Jean. Most of them used to be people from the Sun Clan's residence. Qin Yining had only returned to the residence for a day, and the servants were only sent over yesterday afternoon. How could she have the time to discipline them? If the servants weren't well-mannered, then it was because the Sun Clan didn't teach them well. What did it have to do with Qin Yining? After last night's incident, everyone didn't think that Qin Yining would swallow her anger. Right now, they were looking at her with subtle gazes. Qin Yining's eyes were bright and full of expectation. It would be great if this barbarian could suddenly fight with old madam. Qin Yining slowly stood up. Everyone's expression became serious. Qin Yining's hands, which were hidden in her sleeves, clenched in excitement. Unexpectedly, Qin Yining bowed in a well-mannered manner and said softly, "Old madam's reprimand is right. It's granddaughter's fault for not disciplining properly. Old madam, please don't be angry." Her well-behaved appearance and meek tone made people feel comfortable and moved. By agreeing like this, it was equivalent to indirectly protecting the Sun Clan. Even old madam couldn't help looking at Qin Yining with a gentler gaze. She was indeed Qin Huayuan's legitimate daughter. Even if she wasn't raised by her side, this child's nature was still kind. Old madam's life's glory and pride were all on her eldest son. Now, looking at the young girl who resembled the young Qin Huayuan, old madam's anger gradually dissipated, and she couldn't help but reveal a smile. "And, just pay more attention in the future. Your father has invited a master for you. He'll be here soon. You should also study carefully." Qin Yining smiled and bowed, "Yes, many thanks to grandmother." "Sit down." Old madam waved her hand. The tense atmosphere just now was resolved by Qin Yining's words. When Qin Huining saw the old madam smiling lovingly at Qin Yining, he clenched his fists so tightly that his fingernails almost broke through his palms. Yu Xiang's forehead was on the ground. She was waiting for Qin Yining to quarrel with old madam. Then, she would take the opportunity to accuse her of being vicious and mistreating her servants. Who would have thought that the savage didn't play her cards according to the rules? Old madam's gaze turned to Yu Xiang, and there was a bit of speculation in her eyes. "What matter do you want me to decide?" Raise your head and answer. Yu Xiang raised her head. Her dirty face was covered with soot. She wiped away the white marks left by her tears, and they turned black again. The girls looked away and felt their throats churning. As if she had suffered a great injustice, Yu Xiang sobbed, "I beg old madam to take charge and transfer us servants out of Snow Pear Courtyard. I can't live in Snow Pear Courtyard anymore. I'll definitely be tortured to death by fourth young lady." Old madam frowned and glanced at second Furin. Second Furin immediately understood and said in a low voice, "Nonsense. Fourth young lady is the master. As a master, why would she deliberately torture her servants? What's more, as servants, how can you choose where to serve? It's your fortune to be able to serve fourth young lady in Snow Pear Courtyard. Now, you come to old madam to sow discord and even dare to frame fourth young lady. You want to rebel. Second Furin is wise. I really had no choice but to do this. Fourth young lady is too ruthless. Ruelan and I had just served her for a day, and we were tortured to this state. Fourth young lady stepped on Ruelan and hit her. Look at her face, it's still swollen." Yu Xiang stood up and pulled Ruelan over. She pointed at her bruised lips and then pointed at herself. "Also, fourth young lady punished me to boil water in the small kitchen for no reason. It took me half the night to boil water and she didn't allow me to sleep." Speaking of this, Yu Xiang burst into tears. Her tears once again flushed two white streaks on her cat-like face. After hearing Yu Xiang's words, Ruelan wished she could immediately learn the magic of the Mao Mountain. It would be great if she could become invisible. Yu Xiang was usually a very clever person. How could she be stupid at such a critical moment? It was fine if she was stupid alone, but she even dragged her into it. Ruelan was so frightened that she knelt on the ground and racked her brains to think of a way to protect herself. Yu Xiang also knelt and kowtowed again. "Old madam, please help me. Today, I risked my life to come and speak. If I go back, I'm afraid fourth young lady will directly beat me to death." While Yu Xiang was crying and complaining, everyone's gaze had shifted back and forth several times on Qin Huining's red and swollen cheeks. If there was anything wrong with beating someone up, it was something Qin Yining would do. The emperor promoted benevolent governance, so there hadn't been a case of killing a servant in the prime minister's manor for many years. Moreover, no one had ever seen a young lady from a respectable family who could fight. The matter of Qin Huining being beaten had just been lightly glossed over by the old madam. Who would have thought that a servant girl would come and complain? Everyone wanted to know how Qin Yining would react. She calmly ate the food that the old madam gave her. They didn't believe that she would be able to tolerate a servant girl. However, Qin Yining still sat upright. He lowered his eyes and looked at the footstool in front of the old madam's Arhat bed. It was as if a flower could be seen from his gaze. He didn't say a word of explanation. From beginning to end, he didn't even look at Yu Xiang. It was as if she didn't exist. This time, even the old madam couldn't understand. For a woman, being labeled as someone who mistreated a servant could be considered as having her reputation damaged. Could it be that Qin Yining didn't care? Or did she simply not understand the stakes of this matter? The atmosphere froze again. In the quiet room, only the sound of Yu Xiang sobbing could be heard. The old madam frowned. Just as she was about to speak, Ruelan suddenly came forward on her knees and kowtowed 3 times. She said loudly, "Old madam, you mustn't believe Yu Xiang's words. Fourth young lady is really wronged." Yu Xiang was stunned when she heard this. She turned around and glared at Ruelan in shock and anger. "You, what are you saying? Didn't we?" Ruelan didn't wait for Yu Xiang to finish speaking. She hurriedly said, "It's not like what Yu Xiang said. Fourth young lady did punish her to boil water, but Yu Xiang was punished because she made a mistake." Yesterday, Yu Xiang secretly hid a lot of jewelry that first madam gave to fourth young lady. She thought that fourth young lady didn't recognize the words on the account book and didn't know the material of the jewelry. She didn't expect that fourth young lady was so smart that she could see that many things were missing at a glance. As she spoke, Ruilan looked at Qin Yining with admiration. Fourth young lady didn't point it out at that time. She just hinted Yu Xiang indirectly and hinted Yu Xiang to return the jewelry. Yu Xiang felt that she was exposed and had no face. She had to return the jewelry secretly. However, she still held a grudge in her heart. When we went out with fourth young lady, she embezzled the charcoal for fourth young lady and refused to give the charcoal basin in the main room. She made the room as cold as an ice house. Last night, I was accidentally injured by fourth young lady because I tore Master Luo apart. When I returned to the yard, Yu Xiang saw it and slandered fourth young lady. My persuasion was in vain. Fourth young lady happened to come back and heard what Yu Xiang said behind her back. She was punished by fourth young lady to boil water because of several sins. She was just a maidservant who dared to steal from her master. Her master didn't say anything and didn't punish her severely. Instead, she still held a grudge and embezzled the charcoal for her master. I think fourth young lady's punishment to Yu Xiang was merciful enough. Yu Xiang came here today to complain. She really went against her conscience. Ruilan said and kowtowed, "Madam, please have a clear judgment. Don't listen to Yu Xiang's words and accuse fourth young lady wrongly." Qiu Lu, who was standing outside the screen, came out and kowtowed, "Madam, I also heard Yu Xiang's words about fourth young lady. It was very unpleasant. Ruilan's words are true. The servants in Snow Pear Yard can testify." You are talking nonsense." Yu Xiang was furious and was about to come forward to scratch Ruilan's face. Ruilan was so scared that she fell to the ground. Fortunately, Qiu Lu, Ji Xiang, and other maidservants were on the side and tore her away. Yu Xiang screamed, "You are slandering me. Yesterday, I said that I would help you vent your anger. Today, you are biting me. You are a two-faced thing." Yu Xiang, shut up. Qin Yining, who had been silent, finally stood up. With 4 simple words, the noisy Yu Xiang was frightened into silence. Qin Yining walked to Yu Xiang, who was kneeling on the ground, and looked at her condescendingly. Her eyes were so cold that it made Yu Xiang feel cold all over. She looked down at Qin Yining's embroidered shoes and only felt that the foot would kick her chest in the next moment. However, Qin Yining didn't make a move. Instead, she saluted, Madam, it is really my fault for bringing this matter to you. It is my fault that I didn't manage Snow Pear Yard well and let you hear such a dirty thing." Madam allowed Second Furen to speak and coldly watched today's matter. She wanted to see everyone's reaction. She was already very satisfied when she saw that Qin Yining didn't lower herself to quarrel with the maidservants. She also saw that Qin Yining had Ruilan and Qiu Lu come out to speak for her after returning to the Fu for only 1 day. This indirectly proved that she had the ability to control people. Yesterday's obedient and sensible behavior was still fresh in her memory. When she saw Qin Yining instigating her parents, she also had the courage to confront her. When they met today, she didn't only know how to show off her power. She also knew how to take care of her birth mother's face. At this moment, Madame found Qin Yining much more pleasing to the eye. She only felt that she was a girl who was brave, resourceful, and flexible. She was indeed Qin Huayuan's flesh and blood. Naturally, she had some of Prime Minister Qin's vigor when he was young. Madame waved her hand to let Qin Yining get up. "It has nothing to do with you. This girl's temper is crooked." It was as if she wasn't the one who just reprimanded Qin Yining for not knowing how to control her servants. She turned to instruct Mammy Qin, "Go and investigate the people in Snow Pear Yard. Once this matter is proven to be true, immediately sell Yu Xiang. Hearing this, Yu Xiang widened her eyes in horror. Madam, you can't do this. I'm a servant's child. My father is. Old Madam frowned impatiently. I don't care who your father and mother are. To be able to raise such a discontented daughter, I'm afraid they aren't good people. Lu Wan, I'll leave this matter to you. Since she's a child of the family, then follow the rules. Take her away first. I feel annoyed just looking at her. Yes. Mammy Qin immediately called a sturdy older female servant. She stuffed Yu Xiang's mouth with a handkerchief and directly dragged her away. Seeing Yu Xiang being dragged away, Ruelan was also a little scared. Chapter 17. Ruelan had never truly felt that her life and death was completely in her master's hands. Thinking back to how she looked down on Qin Yining yesterday, she was so regretful that her intestines almost turned green. But now that things had come to this, whether she lived or died, it all depended on her master's words. Ruelan was so nervous that her palms were sweating. She looked up and met Qin Yining's calm eyes. She hurriedly lowered her eyes and tried her best to show her obedience. Qin Yining blinked, smiled, and retreated to the side. In this way, he didn't plan to pursue the matter. Ruelan's hanging heart finally relaxed. She was very grateful for Qin Yining's magnanimity. She kowtowed to the old madam and saluted to her masters before retreating with Qiu Lu. Seeing all of this, the second madam and the third madam couldn't help but smile. They approved of Qin Yining's way of handling things. If Qin Yining dealt with Ruelan now, it would probably make those who wanted to seek refuge with her reconsider. After all, a person who had just helped her was dealt with in the blink of an eye. It wasn't something that would make people feel good. Looking at today's matter, although everything didn't go well, looking at the old madam's appearance now, her mood was actually very good. The second madam and the third madam knew clearly that the reason the old madam could be so calm was because of Qin Yining's words just now. She quietly scratched the old madam's itch just right. No matter if it was her scheming, her intelligence, or her innate intelligence, this girl wasn't an ordinary person. They had previously thought that Qin Yining was a barbarian, but now it seemed that they were shallow. Although this girl looked soft and weak, she was truly brave and resourceful, and knew when to advance and retreat. She was so intelligent, well-mannered, and full of intelligence. She was much better than a woman who was full of knowledge but didn't know how to do things. For women like them, who were born in noble families, their greatest use in the future was to form alliances through marriage. If a woman was full of knowledge but didn't know when to advance or retreat, it would be difficult for her to establish herself in her husband's family. Moreover, it was a virtue for a woman to have no talent. Most of the families in this dynasty did not require a woman to be knowledgeable. It was enough for her to be able to recognize the accounting books when managing the household. From the looks of it, Qin Yining had already met these requirements. Not only was she not weaker than the other girls, she was even stronger than them. Not only was she intelligent, but she also had an illustrious family background and a powerful maternal family. She also had a gorgeous appearance that ordinary girls could only dream of. That last point alone was enough to make her future husband fall head over heels for her. For such a girl to be able to obtain old madam's favor, wasn't it just around the corner? After listening to this analysis, second madam and third madam couldn't help but have a whole new level of respect for Qin Yining. Even their attitude towards her had to change a little. Second madam asked with concern if Qin Yining's clothes were still warm. Third madam smiled and said, I just received a set of top-notch jasper head ornaments. Sister E just returned home. Third aunt doesn't have any good meeting gifts, so I'll have someone send it to you later. Qin Yining stood up and bowed. She smiled and said, Thank you, third aunt. good child. We're all family, so there's no need to be so polite. You just returned home, so let's interact more. If you have nothing to do, you can go to Third Aunt's place to play. If there's anything you need, you can come find us. Third Madam pulled Second Madam's hand and said, "Isn't that right, second sister-in-law?" Second Madam nodded in an extremely amiable manner and said, "Your third aunt is right." Seventh young miss gave Chin Ening a friendly smile in a timely manner, indicating that she would listen to her mother's words and welcome her. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room was unprecedentedly harmonious. Chin Ening obediently accompanied the elders. She was very quiet and didn't speak much. However, it was precisely because of this steadiness and her resemblance to her father's appearance that people couldn't help but value her a little more. Chin Ening coldly watched all of this from the sidelines. The jealousy and hatred in her heart were like a flood breaking through a dam. She saw with her own eyes that the attention and love that used to belong to her had now become someone else's. Her face was injured to this extent. Not only did the culprit not receive the punishment he deserved, but he was also looked at with new eyes. When did she, Chin Ening, become a stepping stone for someone else to climb up the social ladder? However, when all of this happened, she couldn't resist or break free from it. She could only accept it obediently, and she had to accept it with a smile. Chin Ening felt wronged, angry, jealous, and resentful of these people who didn't take her seriously. However, she could only hide all of this in her heart. She couldn't show it in the slightest, so as to avoid losing everything she had now. She lowered her head. Under the surging emotions, she couldn't help but clench her teeth and tremble. However, she had to endure it. Right at this moment, the head maidservant Ji Xiang came in and bowed. Replying to Old Madam, First Madam has returned. Mother Bao, Duchess Ding's personal maid, came with her. She's outside the door asking for an audience. Old Madam's mood, which had already turned for the better, became bad again when she heard the words, First Madam. The eldest daughter-in-law was arrogant and domineering, and she couldn't give birth to a son. She looked down on her. However, Qin Huayuan still needed to rely on Duke Ding's mansion for court affairs. Old Madam knew that the help of in-laws was very important to Qin Huayuan. Moreover, she could see that although the Sun clan was arrogant and domineering, they didn't have many bad intentions. As a mother-in-law, she could only turn a blind eye to many things. However, this time, the Sun clan suddenly returned to their maternal family and left after quarreling with Qin Huayuan. This kind of woman really couldn't help but be blamed. She was a mother-in-law. If she blindly retreated because of the strength of her daughter-in-law's maternal family, not only would others look down on her, but even the remaining two daughters-in-law and the daughters-in-law of this family would say that she, the head of the family, was a pushover. Then, how could she establish her prestige in the future? Wouldn't everyone be able to learn from her? Old Madam's face darkened. She waved her hand and said, "You can all go." She looked like she wanted to argue with the Sun clan. Second Madam and Third Madam were also unwilling to get involved in this muddy water, so they each took their daughters and left. Qin Ening also planned to leave. However, Old Madam thought for a while and said, "Lujuan, take Sister Yi and Sister Hui to the inner room to apply medicine." "Yes." Mammy Qin nodded in understanding. It seemed that Old Madam intended to let the girls meet Mother Bao of Duke Ding's mansion. Mother Bao was Duke Ding's concubine and was deeply trusted. Duke Ding's mansion had specially arranged for her to come. She probably wanted to explain or make amends. Moreover, telling Mother Bao some things was equivalent to telling Duke Ding's mansion. Yesterday's matter involved the two girls. It was better to make it clear in front of Mother Bao, lest things become more complicated under suspicion. Mammy Qin took Qin Ening and Qin Huining to the inner room. This room was only separated from Old Madam's side room by a floor-to-ceiling cover. There were all kinds of exquisite decorations on the antique shelf. There was also a pot of blooming green chrysanthemums in the corner. The bedding was also the same light green color as the chrysanthemums, making the entire room look fresh and bright. Chin Ening and Chin Huining sat down on the Arhat bed with a light green brocade bedding across the small table. Mammy Chin took the ointment to help them apply it. In the side room, the head maidservant Ji Xiang and the Sun clan servants, Mother Jean, Zaiju, and Kai Lan, had already served the Sun clan and entered the room. Old Madam sat at the head of the table, looking no different from usual. However, the Sun clan looked embarrassed. They bowed and said, "Old Madam, your daughter-in-law is back." Old Madam's expression was indifferent. Although she didn't scold them angrily, she expressed her anger very clearly. The Sun clan felt very embarrassed. She thought, this old fellow actually didn't give me any face in front of my maternal family. However, even if she didn't like it, she didn't dare to disobey her mother-in-law. Moreover, her biological mother's words were still in her ears. She didn't dare to disobey. She could only brace herself and say, "Old Madam, don't be angry. Yesterday, because I learned that my mother wasn't feeling well, I was too anxious. That's why I didn't return to Old Madam and hurriedly returned to Duke Ding's Fu. Please forgive this daughter-in-law for the sake of her filial piety." After the Sun clan finished speaking, her face was already burning. She had always been noble. When had she ever lowered her head like this? Old Madam clearly knew that what she said was a lie, but looking at her humble attitude, Old Madam couldn't do anything to her. Yesterday's matter wasn't easy to spread. Qin Huayuan had already instructed to resolve it as soon as possible. If she continued to hold on to it and spread the matter, Old Madam was afraid that it would delay her beloved son. Moreover, the Sun clan was also rarely like this. In the end, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law still had to interact in the future. Moreover, this was in front of Mama Bao. She still had to give some face to the Sun clan. Old Madam said, "Forget it. Quickly get up. How is your mother-in-law's health now?" "She's already much better." The Sun clan secretly sighed in relief. She smiled and went to refill Old Madam's teacup. On the other hand, Mama Bao bowed deeply to Old Madam. Old Madam's smile became very warm. She was still sitting cross-legged on the Arhat bed. She leaned forward with one hand and helped Mama Bao up. "Quickly get up. I haven't seen Mama Bao for many days. Please sit down. Ji Xiang, serve the tea." Mama Bao repeatedly said that she didn't dare. She turned sideways and sat on the brocade chair to the side. Then, she courteously received the white porcelain bowl that Ji Xiang brought over. She smiled and asked about Old Madam's health. Old Madam and Mama Bao chatted amiably for a while. Finally, the matter moved to the fourth young miss, who had just returned to the Fu. Old Madam, our madam was very happy when she found out that the Prime Minister had found the vast sea pearl that had been lost for many years. She instructed this servant to follow Great Aunt to the Fu. First, it was because of Great Aunt's matter. She asked this servant to follow Great Aunt to the Fu. Second, this servant brought some first-rate medicinal herbs and a few pieces of satin that the Emperor had just bestowed. These are some of our madam's goodwill. The most important thing was that madam wanted this servant to see young miss. She wanted to arrange a date to invite young miss to return to Duke Ding's Fu. Old madam's heart felt very warm when she heard Mama Bao's words. Other than apologizing, she also brought gifts. She had no reason to not let her maternal family see the child. Mother-in-law is too courteous. Our family is flesh and blood. Why do you need to be like this? Mama Bao, please go back and thank Duke Ding's madam on my behalf. It just so happens that that girl is in the inner room right now. As old madam spoke, she instructed Ji Xiang to invite her out. Chapter 18. The inner room and the side room were separated by a floor-to-ceiling cover. If one looked carefully through the engraved Rui pattern, they could even see the figures of Old Madam and the Sun Clan. Their conversation naturally reached the ears of Qin Yining and Qin Huaining. Qin Yining sat quietly and played with the blue and white porcelain bowl in her hand. Qin Huaining gritted her teeth and forced herself to maintain a dignified sitting posture. She secretly thought about how she could talk to Mother Bao and let her grandmother know how much she had suffered. Therefore, when she heard that Old Madam wanted them to go out, Qin Huaining was instantly happy. She felt that she had met a pillow when she was sleepy. Her luck was about to change. She didn't believe that Mother Bao, who paid attention to etiquette, would still have a good impression of her after knowing that Qin Yining had hit someone. If Mother Bao didn't like Qin Yining, then Duchess Ding's first impression of Qin Yining wouldn't be good. In any case, she had more than 10 years of relationship with her mother and Old Madam. In addition, with Duchess Ding's favoritism, her future days might not be bad. Thinking of this, Qin Huaining stood up. Without waiting for the maidservant to help her, she staggered out and even threw away the dignified manner that she cared about the most. Qin Yining was the complete opposite of her. She slowly stood up and tidied her clothes. She smiled at the head maidservant Ji Xiang, who came in to pass on the message, "Thank you for your trouble, older sister." Her bright smile made Ji Xiang dazed for a moment. She sighed inwardly and respectfully helped her out. "This servant doesn't dare." "Miss, you can call this servant Ji Xiang." At this time, Mother Bao was looking curiously in the direction of the inner room. In the blink of an eye, she saw Qin Huaining stagger out. "Mother!" Qin Huaining sobbed and threw herself into the arms of the Sun Clan. "Mother, you're finally back." She looked as if someone had wronged her greatly when the Sun Clan wasn't at home. Seeing this, Old Madam frowned. When Mama Bao saw Qin Huaining acting like this, she frowned in confusion. If she wasn't mistaken, she seemed to have seen half of Qin Huaining's face become red and swollen. The Sun Clan member patted Qin Huaining on the back and said with a smile, "What's wrong?" "It's only been one night and my sister Hui already misses me so much." Qin Huaining raised her red and swollen face and cried, "Mother, I miss you so much." Half of her delicate face was already swollen beyond recognition. Coupled with her weeping appearance, Madame Sun's heart tightened at the sight of her. "Sister Hui, what's wrong with your face?" The Sun Clan member's voice was sharp and urgent, but he was very careful when he touched her cheek. Qin Huaining's tears fell like pearls from a broken necklace. She choked with sobs and shook her head. It's nothing. It's my fault." While the mother and daughter were talking, Qin Yining had already walked forward with Ji Xiang's help. She properly bowed to Old Madam and the Sun Clan member before bowing to Mama Bao. Mama Bao quickly got up and avoided her. She didn't dare to accept her greeting and turned to give Qin Yining a big bow. "Fourth young lady, I'm Madame Bao. I'm here to visit you on the orders of Duchess Ding." Qin Yining copied Mama Bao's actions and also avoided her greeting. She then went forward to support Mama Bao with both hands and said politely, "Mama Bao, please get up. I've troubled you to make this trip. I originally wanted to visit my maternal grandmother and maternal grandfather." When Mama Bao stood up, she looked up and coincidentally met a pair of eyes that were as bright as a clear spring. Even though she was an experienced and knowledgeable old nanny, she was still shocked by that pair of eyes that looked down and smiled. She had long eyebrows that reached her temples and was full of heroic spirit. Her almond-shaped eyes were bright and spirited. Her facial features were exquisite as if they were carved. She was tall and had a calm temperament. This girl indeed resembled the young Qin Huaiyuan. However, compared to Qin Huaiyuan, she had more of a woman's unique charm and purity. She also had a bit of craftiness and spirituality. She was truly a charming and outstanding person. From the moment Qin Yining and Qin Huining walked out of the inner room until now, Mama Bao had been carefully observing them. Compared to Qin Huining's grievances and complaints, Qin Yining's appearance was much more dignified. Moreover, Mama Bao was used to the evil tricks in the inner residence. Qin Huining's appearance of exaggerating her grievances and concealing her schemes was inevitably a bit more pretentious. Only the people of the Sun clan, who were wholeheartedly devoted to their daughter and were overflowing with motherly love, wouldn't discover that she was scheming. When Dowager Duchess saw Qin Huining crying and rushing out, she was very displeased in her heart. Dirty linen should not be aired in public. Regardless of whether Qin Huining was in the wrong or not, this matter should be resolved behind closed doors in the Prime Minister's foo. How could this muddle-headed girl publicize this matter in front of the people of Duke Ding's foo? Fortunately, Dowager Duchess saw that although Qin Yining had never learned the rules, she was able to intelligently imitate others and perform the etiquette properly. Only then was Dowager Duchess's gloominess slightly relieved. Dowager Duchess loved Qin Huining from the bottom of her heart. She also understood her fear and difficulties. However, she was dissatisfied with her current attitude. In the past, she didn't feel anything when she didn't encounter any problems. Now that she had truly encountered a major problem, Qin Huining's various actions seemed a bit petty. Her behavior wasn't as steady as a girl who came from the mountains. Seeing Qin Yining and Mama Bao greet each other, Dowager Duchess said, "Sit down and talk." "Yes." Mama Bao and Qin Yining responded. However, Sun Clan's brows were knitted into a knot. He pulled Qin Huining, who was sobbing, to look at Dowager Duchess and said in a loud voice, "Dowager Duchess, daughter-in-law has only left for one night. How did Sister Hui's face become like this? Could it be that someone bullied her? If there really is such a person, I definitely won't let it go. Even if she has become my adopted daughter, she is still a young miss of our foo. There's no reason for her to be bullied for no reason." Sun Clan's words were righteous and confident. His eyes that stared at Dowager Duchess contained two clusters of flames. She only thought that Qin Huining had done something wrong and was slapped by Dowager Duchess. How could she, as a mother, not vent her anger for her daughter? In the end, Sun Clan didn't think that Qin Huining was beaten by Qin Yining. Sun Clan's indignant appearance almost made Dowager Duchess fall backwards in anger. "Eldest daughter-in-law, are you talking to your mother-in-law?" Sun Clan's wife pursed her chin and pursed her lips. She was in a dilemma. Many words that she could use to argue with Dowager Duchess flashed through her mind. However, she hesitated because of her birth mother's reminder when she returned to the foo. Looking at Sun Clan's expression, Dowager Duchess could guess what she was thinking. Looking at Qin Huining's sobbing appearance, she couldn't even speak clearly. Instead, it aroused the Sun Clan's suspicion of her. Her mood instantly fell to the bottom. She didn't want to leave any face for Sun Clan anymore. "Sun Clan, you don't need to speak to me like this. We are well aware of what happened last night. Mama Bao isn't an outsider. I'm already so old. There's no need for me to make a fuss over your eldest branch's matters. Take a look at what kind of good daughter you've taught." Dowager Duchess glared at Sun Clan's wife and turned to say, "Look at Sister Hui, you feel so sorry for her. But wasn't Sister Hui beaten because you didn't teach her properly? Because you lost control of your behavior? Sister Hui wasn't careful with her words and caused you to misunderstand Sister Yi. You felt that she was a mistress. You quarreled with Brother Meng without any verification and even went back to your maternal home. Sister Yi is an upright person. When she saw you go back to your maternal home, she felt that Sister Hui was the one who instigated it. No matter if it was intentional or not, it couldn't be forgiven. Although one of these two children made an unintentional mistake, and the other was wholeheartedly angry for the sake of her parents' harmony. Sisters don't get along well. They should be punished. I, this old woman, have already taught them a lesson on your behalf. What? You ran back to your maternal home, and when you come back, you're going to blame the mother-in-law who helped you teach your daughter. That's too absurd. Dowager Duchess's words stunned Sun Clan's wife. Mama Bao, who was listening on the side, had already analyzed several key points in Dowager Duchess's words. Qin Yining hit Qin Huining. Qin Huining's words inadvertently caused the Sun Clan to suspect Qin Yining's identity, causing the Sun Clan and Qin Huayuan to quarrel. Looking at Dowager Duchess's expression, Qin Yining hit Qin Huining, but Dowager Duchess didn't hate Qin Yining. When she thought of this, Qin Yining's steady manner of saluting and Qin Huining's tearful and aggrieved manner, many conjectures had already appeared in Mama Bao's mind. Mama Bao smiled and tried to smooth things over. Dowager Duchess Qin, please calm down. Our grand-aunt is a straightforward person, and you dote on her the most. Please don't cause any misunderstandings because of this matter. However, the Sun Clan didn't pay attention to Mama Bao's words. Instead, they turned their gaze to Qin Yining, who was standing quietly at the side, and questioned, "You hit Sister Hui?" Qin Yining lowered her eyes and said, "Yes. You are so vicious." In reply to Madam, Qin Huining's words hinted at you to misunderstand father and affected the harmony between you and father. Your daughter hit her because she couldn't take it anymore. The Sun Clan gritted her teeth and said, "Am I dead? You don't have the right to lecture her." Grand-aunt. Mama Bao heard the Sun Clan's outrageous words and grabbed her wrist. She stared into her eyes and said word by word, "Please be careful with your words." The Sun Clan was so angry that she kept panting. Her chest heaved up and down because of her rapid breathing. Qin Huining seemed to have just recovered from her shock. She knelt down with a plop and sobbed, "Mother, please calm down. It's my fault. Everything is my fault. Please don't be angry anymore. If you hurt your body because of anger, wouldn't it be my fault?" Even though Madame Sun knew that she should happily accept Qin Yining as her daughter, she couldn't swallow her anger when her daughter was so wronged. If Mama Bao wasn't holding her back, she really wanted to rush up and slap Qin Yining's face. She wanted her face to be as swollen as Qin Huining's. Qin Yining calmly looked at the furious Sun Clan. Her heart, which had already turned cold, was frozen this time. She was very sensitive to hostility. She wouldn't be wrong about the Sun Clan's gaze that was filled with hostility. It was as if they wanted to swallow her alive. Not only did her mother refuse to acknowledge her, but she also wanted to hurt her. Qin Yining sighed softly and lowered her long eyelashes. She shouldn't have any more fantasies. Mama Bao saw that the old madam didn't like it, so she smiled and left. The old madam didn't want to keep any more people here. Her heart was in a mess, so she couldn't be bothered to look at these people. She even felt annoyed looking at Qin Huining, who she usually liked, so she simply sent everyone away. Chapter 19. After Qin Yining was hated by her birth mother, she was in low spirits. However, when she heard Mama Bao's words, she immediately forced herself to focus and chase away all her emotions. She smiled politely at Mama Bao and said, "Mama Bao is too polite. I really don't deserve this. Does maternal grandmother have any orders?" When Mama Bao heard this was the first time she looked at Qin Yining up close. Other people might not have heard the power behind Qin Yining's words, but Mama Bao had been in the inner residence for many years. She was a wily old fox. How could she not understand? The first part of Qin Yining's words expressed her respect for Duchess Ding and her, and gave her enough face. The second part reminded her of her status and made Mama Bao feel that even if she wanted to side with Qin Yining and use her seniority to admonish her, she would have to think twice after hearing this. She had just seen old matriarch Qin's attitude towards Qin Yining and her actions. Even though she had indirectly reminded her, Mama Bao was not angry. She looked at Qin Yining with more admiration and respect. "Would Miss please move?" Mama Bao smiled and pointed at Mount Chrysanthemum in Xingning Garden. Qin Yining looked in the direction she was pointing and saw that other than a small Mount Chrysanthemum made of potted chrysanthemum plants, there was an empty space around it. It was some distance away from the front hall, side rooms, veranda, and back seats. At first, Qin Yining did not understand. However, when she walked next to Mount Chrysanthemum with Mama Bao and looked at the main room in the distance, she understood. There was no place for people to hide. They were not afraid of others hearing their conversation. She couldn't help but remember this method and think that the people who grew up in the large residence were all very smart. Mama Bao stood respectfully in front of Qin Yining and said with a smile, "Miss has returned to the Fu. I presume that you will not be able to adjust to life immediately." "That is true," Qin Yining said honestly. "However, it is already a gift from the heavens that I am fortunate enough to return. I do not dare to ask for anything else. I only ask to be filial in front of my parents and elders." Mama Bao praised her answer in her heart. She could tell that Qin Yining was not good at talking to people because she spoke slowly and clearly needed to think. However, her words were very appropriate and showed that she was intelligent. Mama Bao had originally wanted to beat around the bush, but when she saw Qin Yining's reaction, she changed her mind and went straight to the point. "After fourth young lady returned to the manor, I'm afraid that first madam was somewhat against you, right?" Hearing this, Qin Yining blinked her long eyelashes and then smiled. Mama Bao must be joking. As a mother, there was no reason for her to reject her child. Madam just hadn't seen it clearly yet. "Moreover, I admire Madam's motherly love, and I also envy Miss Huining." Mama Bao fiddled with the hollow silver bracelet on her wrist. She thought about Qin Yining's words carefully and smiled sincerely. Qin Yining's words revealed 4 layers of meaning. She knew that the Sun clan had been blinded. She also knew that the Sun clan was a good mother who loved her child dearly. She also knew who had blinded Madame Sun's eyes. Most importantly, although she had not been accepted by her mother, she did not hate her. Instead, she was willing to wait. Her expression was so sincere that it was obvious that Qin Yining had already understood her intentions and gave the answer that Duchess Ding wanted to know the most. Even the young ladies raised by Duchess Ding's side might not be able to reach such a clear-minded girl. She was much better than her middle-aged grandaunt, who was still reckless and impulsive. This old servant understands fourth young lady's meaning. Mama Bao bowed solemnly. Qin Yining turned sideways and only accepted half of Mama Bao's bow. Then, she returned half of the bow and took Mama Bao's aged hands. "You are grandmother's right-hand woman. In my heart, you are also an elder. There is no need to be so polite in the future. I don't know what Madam has arranged for me, and I don't know when I will be able to pay respects to grandfather and grandmother. Please send my regards to grandmother." Yes, this old servant understands. Mama Bao and Qin Yining looked at each other and smiled. Then, they walked slowly back to the main hall at the same time. During this time, they only chatted and did not talk about anything important. The servant girl in the corridor lifted the warm curtain in front of the door and announced their arrival. Qin Yining and Mama Bao entered the door one after the other and saw the Sun clan sitting on the chaise lounge by the window with an angry expression. Qin Yining was sitting close to the Sun clan and was sobbing and wiping her tears with a handkerchief. The tense atmosphere in the room made Mama Bao and Qin Yining understand that Qin Huining must have fiercely complained to Qin Yining. The Sun Clan suppressed her anger and forced a polite smile at Mama Bao. She said, "Mama Bao, please have a seat. Let me deal with some family matters first. I will talk with you later." As she spoke, she forcefully ordered Saiju to bring over a tray for Mama Bao. She did not care whether she had sat down or not. She pointed at Qin Yining and said, "You. Kneel." From the moment Qin Yining entered the room, the smile on her face had disappeared. She slightly furrowed her brows and pursed her pink lips. She did not resist and knelt down properly. She lowered her eyes and calmly said, "Madam, please calm your anger." "Calm my anger? How can I calm my anger?" The Sun Clan stood up and walked over to Qin Yining. She placed one hand on her waist and bent down to point at Qin Yining. Her bright red fingernails almost poked Qin Yining's face. "I just stepped out of the door and you dare to hit Sister Hui. Do you think that this is your mountain where there is no law?" Qin Yining closed her eyes. Her heart, which had already turned cold, could no longer bear any hope in front of the Sun Clan. After feeling sad, she felt that she could ignore these things. In response to "Madam, I did not." "You did not? Since you did not, could it be that the wound on Sister Hui's face was caused by a ghost? Since Madam knows that Qin Yining was beaten, you must also know why she was beaten. As your daughter, how can I see you being bewitched by others to drive a wedge between you and father? How dare you? You dare to talk back to me in front of me. It's clear how domineering you were after I left. In the end, you were not raised by my side. I don't expect you to be as cultured and well-mannered as the other rich young misses, but you can't really bring those commoners' temperaments into the manor. Do you think that you can stand firm just because you have a strong fist like a shrew? Let me tell you, in your dreams." The Sun Clan's voice was sharp and sharp. Her chest heaved with anger. After scolding for a while, she still felt that it was not enough. She glared at Qin Yining's jet-black hair and roared, "Raise your head." As soon as she finished speaking, Qin Yining obediently raised her head. She did not cry, but there was a faint mist in her large and bright eyes. Her gaze was very calm, and there was not even a trace of dissatisfaction or resentment in her expression. However, when she looked up like this, the Sun Clan felt as if their hearts had been hit by something. She originally wanted to give Qin Yining a heavy slap, but her raised hand froze just like that. When Qin Yining saw her actions, she lowered her long eyelashes. Her eyelashes trembled, but she did not shed a single tear. "Madam, please calm your anger. It's not worth it to harm your body because of anger, and it's not worth it to hit you. If you're angry that I hit Qin Huining, you can punish me however you want. You can punish me by making me kneel on the porcelain tiles, or by chopping firewood and carrying water." After saying this, she lowered her head and said in a low voice, "In the past, when I delivered firewood to a rich family, I saw them punish servants like this when they made a mistake." Deliver firewood. Punish servants who made a mistake. Thinking of her past and experience, anyone with a bit of conscience would not be able to remain indifferent. Also, when did the Sun Clan treat her like a daughter? They treated her worse than the servant girls by her side. The human heart was made of flesh. Mother Bao immediately stood up. Her heart felt as if it had been rubbed by someone, and it was sore and painful. The Sun Clan's hand fell weakly. She looked at Qin Yining with a complicated expression. Mother Bao said in a low voice, "Madam, please calm your anger. Don't forget what Madam said." The Sun Clan pursed their lips and did not say anything. Qin Huining tightly gritted her teeth and clenched her hands into fists. She used a lot of strength to persuade her mother, "Mother, let it go. Your daughter is really fine." Her words reminded the Sun Clan of why they were so angry. However, the unbearable anger from before was now replaced by a faint heartache. Mother Bao looked deeply at Qin Huining and understood a bit more. She turned and said, "Madam, why don't you rest for a while and allow this old servant to walk around the courtyard?" The Sun clan was not in the mood to care too much and waved her hand casually. Mother Bao curtsied and went into the courtyard. She called over a few servant girls and asked them a few questions. Qin Yining knelt there for the time it took for a stick of incense to burn before the Sun clan said, "Forget it. Remember this lesson. Don't be so rough. You are the daughter of the Prime Minister's Fu and the legitimate daughter of our eldest branch. If you don't do things properly and bring in the air of a commoner, people will gossip. When that time comes, you will embarrass our Fu. It won't just be your problem alone. That will also affect the reputation of all the ladies in the Fu." The Sun clan's voice was soft and gentle. Qin Yining's reply was even gentler, "Madam is right. Your daughter understands." Seeing Qin Yining like this, the Sun clan inexplicably felt that they shouldn't bully a child who had been alone since childhood. Thinking of Duchess Ding's words, she sighed. In order to stabilize her position, she would have to acknowledge her anyway. She might as well happily acknowledge her. Moreover, after calming down, the Sun clan felt that Qin Huayuan wasn't so muddle-headed as to confuse the family's bloodline. This girl, it was possible that she really had given birth to her. Although she was a bit unfamiliar now, she would think about it later. "You can leave." The Sun clan rubbed her forehead and didn't look at Qin Yining anymore. Qin Yining bowed and said, "Yes." Then she obediently left. When she reached the outer room, Ruelan and Qiu Lu put on a cloak for her and waited on her as she went out. The Sun clan looked at Qin Huayuan, whose face was swollen and eyes were red from crying, and comforted her, "Don't feel wronged. After all, she is also a pitiful person. Let's forget about it this time. I have some good ointment. Later, I will ask Mother Jean to apply it on you. Your face will quickly recover." Qin Huayuan almost broke her silver teeth from gritting them. Now she could see who was her biological daughter. Chapter 20. The Sun clan sent Qin Huining back to Xiaishao Garden to rest. But for some reason, the image of Qin Yining holding back his tears as he knelt on the ground and looked up at her seemed to be stuck in her mind. After sending away the people around her, leaving only Mama Bao behind, the Sun clan solemnly said, "You've been by Mother's side for a long time. You've eaten more salt than I've eaten rice. You see things more clearly than I do. In your opinion, did Sister Hui really sow discord between the two of you?" Mama Bao smiled and said, "I'm a sensible person. It's just that I was blinded by my motherly love. In reality, don't you already have an answer in your heart?" "Answer?" The Sun clan looked pensive. "That's right. Madam always said that if you want to see how a person is, you don't need to care about what that person says. You only need to look at the outcome to get a rough idea of what that person has done. For example, although you said that you didn't forgive son-in-law, didn't you still come back to the Fu? It's clear that you truly care for son-in-law. This old servant thinks that son-in-law will definitely understand your sincerity. That's why he's always cared for you." These words made the Sun clan's heart feel warm, and their tense mood slightly relaxed. But thinking about it carefully, wasn't that the case? Although she was noisy, she still cared about Qin Huayuan. Although Qin Huayuan had glared at her before, he still respected her. The Sun clan couldn't help but mutter, "Sister Hui is very sensible. Every word she says warms my heart. It's just that I did become suspicious of Sister Yi's past because of one of her unintentional words. It was because of this suspicion that I quarreled with the Prime Minister in a moment of desperation. Also, before I returned to the Fu today, I had already decided to acknowledge Sister Yi. But just now, I couldn't control my temper and almost hit her. Mama Bao lowered her eyes and smiled without saying anything. The Sun Clan shook their heads in disbelief. No, no, no. Sister Hui has a good heart. Perhaps all of this was just a coincidence. Mama Bao, don't you think so? When Mama Bao saw the Sun Clan's reaction, she swallowed her words of, where did all these coincidences come from? She was just a maidservant. Even Duchess Ding had not been able to correct the Sun Clan after so many years of persuasion. What was the use of her words? Mama Bao comforted the Sun Clan for a while more before she hurriedly bid farewell and returned to Duke Dinghua's estate. She left the Sun Clan in a daze, deep in thought. At the same time, Qin Yining was on his way back to Snow Pear Courtyard with Ruelan and Qiu Lu. It was quiet all around, and very few people passed by. Occasionally, a flock of birds could be seen flying up from the withered branches in the distance. The early winter sky was blue, but the weather seemed to be colder than yesterday. As soon as they entered the courtyard, Mama Zhu greeted them with a smile. Young lady, you're back. The instructor from the palace that the Prime Minister invited for you has arrived. Hearing this, Qin Yining looked up and saw a dignified woman in her 40s come out to greet them. She smiled and curtsied. I'm Jean, an instructor in charge of etiquette in the palace. I'm here to accompany young lady for a few days under the orders of the Empress. The Empress? Qin Yining was a little surprised. When the Prime Minister found his legitimate daughter, the Emperor was very happy. When he heard the Prime Minister talk about the situation in the manor, he told the Empress. The Empress is the mother of the country, so he arranged for me to come. You don't have to be so polite, Mama Jean. My daughter is vulgar, so I'll have to trouble you. Qin Yining politely invited Mama Jean into the room and began to study carefully. Duke Ding's manor. Nanny Bao carefully told Duchess Ding about what had happened in the Prime Minister's manor today. Duchess Ding was twirling a string of jade prayer beads in her hand. The prayer beads made a crisp sound, and the light purple tassels with gold beads at the bottom swayed. With the jade ring on Duchess Ding's hand, it looked particularly beautiful. After a while, she stopped and said softly, it seems that Sister Hui really did it. Mama Bao nodded and said, yes, I can see that Miss Huining did instigate the Empress. You know the Empress's temperament. Duchess Ding raised her right hand and rubbed her eyebrows, saying, Sister Han is a straightforward person. She dares to shoot at others. I used to think that Sister Hui was a good girl. Why did she? Mama Bao knew that Duchess Ding knew everything in her heart. She just felt uncomfortable for a while, so she didn't say much and carefully massaged Duchess Ding's temples. After a long while, Duchess Ding sighed faintly. Sister Yi's appearance is really similar to Qin Meng's. Yes, she's very much like the son-in-law when he was young. But this old servant sees that Miss Yi Ning's appearance is a bit more intelligent than the son-in-law when he was young. Her heart is also very pure and filial. Even if this great-aunt deliberately makes things difficult for her, she only obediently accepts it and doesn't give this great-aunt any anger. It's hard for her to be so sensible and sensible after suffering so much over the years. She hasn't changed her mind. Duchess Ding laughed. It's hard for you to praise someone so much. Mama Bao smiled embarrassedly. It's really because Miss Yi Ning is so lovable. Well, it's better for me to pick her up than for Sister Han to bring her here. Duchess Ding thought for a while and ordered, send someone to the outer courtyard to have a look. Brother Ziming should be back by now. The brother Ming mentioned by Duchess Ding was Sun Yu, the grandson of Duchess Ding and the eldest grandson of Duchess Ding. Mama Bao said in surprise, Madam, do you want the eldest son to go to the Prime Minister's mansion to pass a message? Yes. Duchess Ding thought for a while and said, if others go, it will seem that we don't pay enough attention to them. Since they want to invite someone and Sister Yi is a good person, as her grandmother, I naturally have to do something for her. Our brother Ming has a good reputation outside and has a high status in the scholarly circle. He also has a good chat with his uncle. It's most appropriate for him to go on behalf of me. Madam, you are very thoughtful. How can the eldest son and the son-in-law just have a good chat? The son-in-law likes the eldest son and wishes he were his own son. Mama Bao smiled and asked a maidservant to run an errand. She couldn't help but give Qin Yining a new position in her heart. It should be known that the grandson of Duchess Ding was not just an ordinary noble. Sun Yu was also a legend among the younger generation of Dian. Sun Yu, whose courtesy name was Yuan Ming, was 26 years old. He was still unmarried because he refused to marry. He had to wait for a peerless beauty to fall in love with. He was a gentleman, elegant, and handsome. He was the leader of the younger generation. The most important thing was that he was talented and had a strong understanding of history, etiquette, and politics. 2 years ago, when Zhou and Yan officially went to war, Sun Yu's declaration of war was written with great literary talent. It directly criticized Zhou until it was covered with cuts and bruises and had no face to see people. While it boosted the morale of Dian, it also made a large number of hot-blooded men join the army to serve the country. The emperor greatly appreciated it and personally ordered Sun Yu to enter the palace for a face-to-face examination. Then, the words of a son should be like Sun Yuanming spread. Even a cautious person like Qin Huayuan began to praise Sun Yuanming openly. He couldn't help but praise Sun Yuanming as a genius in public. Because of that declaration of war, Sun Yu not only became famous in the Dian imperial court, but also in the Zhou imperial court. It was said that Xingchang emperor of Dezhou was seriously ill because of that declaration of war. Such a handsome person with peerless talent could be said to be the treasure of Duchess Ding. Chapter 21. In the main room of the Snow Pear Yard, Nanny Jean watched the incense burn out and nodded with a smile. "Miss, you deserve to be Prime Minister Qin's legitimate daughter. You're really smart. You've learned this posture very well. You must be tired now. Why don't you take a rest?" "Thank you, Nanny Jean." Qin Yining responded, but her dignified posture was not messed up. She just looked a little more relaxed. Nanny Jean liked her even more when she saw her like this. "Miss, you're very smart to apply what you've learned. Although everyone knows the rules and etiquette, not everyone can do it well. What you need to do in the future is to let the new habits go deep into your bones, so that every bone and every piece of meat in your body has new memories. Only in this way can you have a calm demeanor." Nanny Jean is right. Qin Yining agreed and nodded seriously. "In the future, I'll carefully explain to you every move, no matter if you're sitting, lying down, walking, every gesture, every frown, and every smile. I'll let you understand how your every move and look will make others feel." Hearing this, Qin Yining blinked her eyes thoughtfully. Seeing her like this, Nanny Jean couldn't help but teach her, "You're a big girl now. There are some things that I don't have to tell you. For a girl from a noble family like you, your future is all on the road of marriage. And for a girl from a noble family like you, your future husband's family won't be weak. As a woman, it's important to be loved by your husband's family, be gifted with needlework, and have good conduct and talent. In the life of a big house, you have to interact with others. Being filial to your elders and being good to your sisters-in-law is the most important thing. When you interact with others, you can accurately grasp your every move, express various meanings accurately, and analyze other people's mood and psychology from their subtle movements. Although not everyone can learn this skill, you can try to understand it." Qin Yining heard this and looked at Nanny Jean with admiration. This was the first time since Qin Yining had returned home that someone had laid out her future in front of her. However, the person who was so honest with her was not her mother, grandmother, or any other female elder, but an etiquette instructor. She knew that Nanny Jean was only here to teach them the rules. There were many things that she didn't have to say. She was extremely grateful for his special care. When Nanny Jean looked into Qin Yining's big eyes, which seemed to be able to speak, she was very happy. She smiled and said, "Just like Mrs. Eyes right now, this servant can see your joy and gratitude." What this servant said just now was actually what I meant. If you can use body language and can understand other people's body language, it will be much more convenient for you to stay in your husband's family in the future. Perhaps you haven't concluded all of this, but you're already using it casually now. Furthermore, this servant can feel your goodwill. Qin Yining's face blushed slightly. She nodded and said, "I understand." Nanny Jean said again, "Rules and etiquette are actually two separate things. Rules are a kind of rule. If you do something wrong, you may be laughed at by others and may even lead to a fatal disaster. Etiquette, on the other hand, is a kind of ability to make people feel like they're bathing in the spring breeze when interacting with others. It's not only in body language, but also in people's language, tone, clothing, color, and so on. During this time, this servant will also teach Miss some clothing combinations. For example, what kind of color combination will give people a feeling, what kind of clothes should be matched with what kind of jewelry. This way, when Miss sees strangers in the future, the first thing you'll know about them is what they like to wear. So, the people I see may deliberately dress like that. Perhaps they want to confuse others, or perhaps they want to strengthen others' feelings, so they deliberately show a kind of appearance for me to see." Nanny Jean's smile deepened. "Miss is smart." "No, it's Nanny's care. I grew up in the countryside and mountains, so I've never come into contact with these things. I don't think anyone will analyze these things for me. Your few words have benefited me greatly and will be of great help to my future." Qin Yining bowed gratefully. "I'll have to trouble Nanny in the future." Moving sideways to avoid her bow, Nanny Jean also returned a big bow. Although she had no choice but to come because of the Empress's edict, after interacting with her for an afternoon, she truly liked and respected the young girl in front of her. She felt that she was honest and cute, without the slightest pretense. After serving in the palace for many years, Nanny Jean had seen all kinds of women. There were many beautiful women, and there were also many intelligent women. However, Qin Yining was the first one that caught her eye. When interacting with Qin Yining, Nanny Jean didn't feel that she was overly polite and flattering, which would make her lose her status as the daughter of the Prime Minister. She also didn't feel that she was arrogant and full of herself, which would make her feel annoyed and too lazy to speak. She was able to keep their relationship at a comfortable distance, which made Nanny Jean, who was used to seeing cold and warm people, want to tell her more. "It's almost time today. Miss must have other things to do, so this servant will leave first." Nanny Jean stood up with a smile. Qin Yining hurriedly said, "Nanny, you've been working hard all afternoon. I've already ordered people to prepare dinner. Please stay and have dinner with me, okay? Miss, this servant is very grateful for the meal. However, you are the daughter of the Prime Minister and have a noble status. This servant doesn't dare to offend you. This servant appreciates your kindness." Nanny Jean declined with a smile. Qin Yining shook her head and said with a smile, "You are now my etiquette instructor, so you are also my master. If this disciple eats at the same table as my master, it will be considered as this disciple overstepping her boundaries. Please don't be polite." These words were so appropriate that Nanny Jean couldn't refuse. She also wanted to be closer to Qin Yining, so she politely thanked her and stayed. The meal wasn't very sumptuous, but Qin Yining specially ordered Nanny Zhu to go to the kitchen and spend money to add more dishes. There were 4 meat and 4 vegetables in a soup. Because Mother Zhu's daughter-in-law was working in the kitchen, she was more careful than usual in cooking, so the taste was needless to say. After the meal, Although they followed the rule of not talking while eating, the two felt that their relationship had become closer. After the meal and tea, Nanny Jean said goodbye again. Qin Yining ordered Ruelan and Qiu Lu to send Nanny Jean back to the guest courtyard to rest. He also asked Qiu Lu to stay in the guest courtyard to serve her and not neglect her. In fact, when the Fu heard that an etiquette instructor had come from the palace, they didn't care. Originally, they had arranged for Nanny Jean to live in the west wing of Snow Pear Courtyard. In the afternoon, Qin Yining ordered Ruelan to go to Xingning Garden to see Nanny Jean. She said that Nanny Jean had come on the Empress's imperial decree. The Sun clan immediately took it seriously and specially went to discuss with old Madame before arranging the guest courtyard. After Ruelan sent Nanny Jean off, she returned to Snow Pear Courtyard. Qin Yining had already been helped by Mother Zhu to spread out the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone to continue copying the classic of filial piety. Mississippi Ruelan took Mother Zhu's place after saluting. She smiled and said, "Everything has been arranged." Mother Jean prepared Nanny Jean's Chui Zhu Xian in the east near the bamboo forest. It's a very elegant residence. Qin Yining didn't raise her head. She wrote quickly, "I know." The people in the Fu were too negligent. It would be good if Nanny Jean lived in the same courtyard as her, but if they neglected this person, it would inevitably offend the higher-ups and cause trouble. Ruelan thought of the courtyard that was many times more exquisite than Snow Pear Courtyard. Then, she looked at her daughter's beautiful side profile and sighed imperceptibly. Qin Yining looked at the dog-like characters she had written on the paper and also wanted to sigh. She was sure that old Madame would disdain the classic of filial piety she copied. She might even get angry and say that she was fooling around. She had tried to write well, but her handwriting was ugly. Now, she had given up. Writing wasn't something that could be done overnight, but the day to report couldn't be delayed. She had to think of a way to pass the test, in the warm room of Xia Shao Garden. You said that the nanny who came to teach Qin Yining the rules was sent by the Empress herself. Qin Yining stopped applying makeup to her face in front of the mirror. The Empress is such a noble person. Why would she think of arranging a nanny for Qin Yining, that wild hussy? It must be father. Mama Kai sighed, it must be so. Father didn't care about me like this before. Qin Yining was disappointed for a moment. Then, her eyes became cold. What kind of person is that nanny? I heard that she used to follow old concubine Xian Yi and imperial noble consort Lu Ming. Later, she went to Zhongcui Palace and was in charge of selecting and teaching the harem during the palace beauty pageant. Such a powerful background. Qin Yining pursed her lips and looked at herself in the mirror. She gradually became lost in thought. She knew that her background was unknown. Although she could compete with Qin Yining in terms of status, it was because she had lived in the Prime Minister's Fu for 14 years. What if one day, Qin Yining surpassed her? Right now, her parents and old Madame were already biased toward their biological child. Although she could win against Qin Yining in terms of poetry, she had to admit that she wasn't as beautiful and charming as Qin Yining's. Although her words were disdainful, her future parents-in-law might not like someone who could say, marry a wife with virtue, take a concubine with good looks. But which man didn't like good looks? She had already been replaced as the daughter of the D. In the future, it would be difficult for her to get married. If Qin Yining had such an outstanding nanny who could prove that she didn't make mistakes in etiquette, wouldn't she have another bargaining chip? No. She couldn't let things continue like this. Qin Yining stood up. Her hands gradually tightened around her skirt until her fingertips turned white. After a moment, she gradually relaxed her grip. Qin Yining's eyes gradually contained a confident smile. Nanny, please go and take a look at grandmother. She has already finished her tea. I should also go and help grandmother wash her feet. Nanny Kai acknowledged her words. Not long after, Qin Yining appeared in old Madam's room. With a swollen face, she obediently helped old Madam wash her feet. She also personally lit a pot of shredded tobacco for old Madam. While chatting, she inadvertently said, Nanny Jean has such a powerful background. If all the sisters in the Fu can learn together, it will be beneficial for the girls in our family. If second uncle and third uncle's family know that the girls in our family can benefit together, they will definitely be grateful to father. Chapter 22. Qin Huining's words tempted old Madam. There were many young ladies in the family, and third miss was going to be of marriageable age in a few days. Her marriage with the second master of the Count of Jian An's Fu had already been discussed. Adding on the layer of gold from the palace, it would be a good thing for the young ladies of the Prime Minister's Fu. But the difficult thing was that the Empress had said to let Nanny Jean teach Qin Yining, but she didn't want to bring anyone else. If they were particularly familiar with Nanny Jean and brought some gold and silver, she wouldn't be afraid that she wouldn't agree. Either way, it was the same as herding a sheep or releasing a flock of sheep. But they weren't familiar with each other, so it wouldn't be good to ask if they came rashly. Moreover, the Empress personally sending a nanny to teach the daughter of an official's family was a rare honor. This was a grace that only the eldest branch received, so there was no reason for the other branches to also get a share. Old Madam was in a dilemma for a moment. She wanted her granddaughters to benefit, but she didn't want to offend the people above her. Old Madam. Just as Old Madam was pondering, Mammy Qin came in with a smile and said, Third Madam is here. Old Madam raised her eyebrows and knocked her tobacco pipe on the side of the small white porcelain bowl. The brass and white porcelain made a loud buzzing sound. Why did she come again so late at night? Qin Huining deftly took a large towel to wipe Old Madam's feet and put on white socks for her. Another maidservant came in and carried out the wooden basin used to wash feet. When Third Madam came in, she saw the scene of Qin Huining helping Old Madam put on her warm boots. Old Madam. Third Madam bowed and then said with a smile, In my opinion, no one in this Fu can compare to Sister Hui's filial piety. This daughter-in-law is really ashamed. Old Madam couldn't help but laugh when she heard this. She reprimanded without any anger, Naughty monkey, you still talk like this in front of your niece. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? Qin Huining also laughed when he heard this, but he secretly rolled his eyes. It was a competition of filial piety and trickery, each using their own abilities. Third Madam herself did not come early, who could she blame? However, Qin Huining also knew that third wife still had some face in front of Old Madam. Don't look at how third old master was born from a concubine. The third wife was the family's economic pillar. Usually, third wife wasn't stingy. Old Madam didn't know how much gold and silver Old Madam received from her as her own. Compared to the arrogant and domineering first Madam who came from a noble background and the second Madam who was full of schemes, third Madam was the one that Old Madam liked the most. Qin Huining didn't want to offend this living god of wealth, so he smiled and said, Third aunt, you must be joking. It's just that I live nearby and happen to be one step ahead. Third aunt's filial piety is even greater than us juniors. Please don't laugh at me. How could that be? Sister Hui was taught by Old Madam. She knows how to behave and scrupulously abide by filial piety. She has a deep relationship with Old Madam and her filial piety is also the most sincere. Third Madam smiled and sat down on the embroidered stool Mammy Qin brought over. She turned and said, Old Madam, I just heard that Mama Jean, who was sent by the Empress, has been arranged to live in Quizhuxuan. As soon as these words came out, Qin Huining smiled. It seemed that she had gained an ally. She didn't want to let Qin Huining take the lead and she could learn a thing or two from him. However, third madam was probably doing this for her legitimate daughter, Qin Jianing. Old madam also understood third madam's meaning. She sighed and gave the brass tobacco pipe to Mammy Qin to put away. She said, "Sister Hui just told me about this matter." Third madam looked at Qin Huining with some surprise. However, in the blink of an eye, she showed a smile that showed that great minds think alike. She moved closer to old madam and said with a smile, "Then what does old madam think?" Old madam said, "I naturally hope that all the girls in our family can have a good future. However, this Mahjong was specially arranged by the Empress to be given to Sister Yi. In the end, it's not good to ask." Third madam smiled when she heard this. She stood up and took the cow milk and bird's nest soup that Mammy Qin was about to give to old madam. She carefully served old madam. Her actions of passing the soup spoon and handkerchief were very considerate. After Mammy Qin sent out the empty bowl and brought an exquisite rinsing bowl to serve old madam to rinse her mouth, third madam sat back in her original position. During this time, old madam was well served by third madam, so she was in a very good mood. She carefully thought about it. As the head of the family and the old madam with a title, presumably, it wouldn't be difficult for her and Qin Huayuan to order Mama Jean to do something. Qin Huining and third madam glanced at each other. Third madam thought for a moment and said with a smile, "Presumably, this matter will need to be arranged. Naturally, I will be the one to pay for it. There's no need for you." Old madam smiled and waved her hand, "For the welfare of my own granddaughters, I'll use the public's money." Qin Huining timely hugged old madam's arm and acted coquettishly, "Grandmother, our family of sisters is counting on you. Presumably, Xiaoxi Mimi is sensible and clever. She certainly won't oppose." Old madam smiled and said, "Even if someone is dissatisfied with this matter, it won't be her turn. Forget it, you all go. I will talk to eldest daughter-in-law tomorrow." "Yes." Third madam and Qin Huining stood up happily. Third madam bowed and retreated. Qin Huining was bored by old madam's side. After a long time, he returned to his warm room. Qin Huining rested and didn't forget to instruct Bitao to arrange for a maidservant to pay attention to the movements outside. As a result, when she woke up early the next morning, she learned that third madam had instructed people to send many things to old madam in the middle of the night. Originally, Qin Huining didn't think much of it. However, when she heard that third madam had woken up early and sent a gift box to Snow Pear Courtyard, and that even the second branch had instructed a proper mama to send gifts, her heart felt unbalanced. Why didn't second aunt and third aunt treat her politely in the past? Their biological children were truly treated differently. Snow Pear Courtyard. Qin Yining instructed people to accept the gifts and entertained the mama who had come to deliver the gifts to drink tea. After chatting for a while, she politely sent the guests off. On the round table in the side room, there were several fashionable rulers, as well as first-rate tea leaves, brushes, and ink, which had been gifted by second madam. Inside the exquisite black lacquer dresser was a set of green jade head ornaments and the newest perfume from Pure Heart Pavilion, which had been gifted by third madam. Qin Yining didn't know much about rouge and face powder, but he knew that they were expensive. After thinking for a while, he instructed Ruelon, "Carefully count the things and record them in an account book. As for these things, use what you need to use." Ruelon couldn't help but feel happy when she heard this. Miss trusted her and wanted her to manage the private storehouse and record the people's relationships. "This servant understands. I won't fail to live up to Mrs. Trust." Ruelon solemnly bowed to Qin Yining. Qin Yining knew that what had happened that night made Ruelon uneasy. Now that he had arranged a task for her, one was to test her, and the other was to reassure her. If the people around her were always on tenterhooks and couldn't communicate with each other, how could they unite against the outside world? "Go do your work." Qin Yining's voice was gentle. He smiled and continued to copy the Book of Filial Piety. Ruilan nodded happily. As if she had been injected with chicken blood, she excitedly went to tidy up carefully with Mama Zhu. Seeing that it was almost time, Qin Yining planned to finish writing the last sentence and then go to the upper room to greet old madam. Unexpectedly, just as he had the idea, a maidservant's voice came from outside. "Miss, Mammy Qin is here." Qin Yining was surprised. He hurriedly put the weasel hair brush on the white porcelain and blue and white flower brush. He stood up and greeted with a smile, "Mammy Qin is here. Please come in and sit down." "Fourth miss, nice to meet you." Mammy Qin smiled and bowed. Ruilan brought a brocade cup, but she didn't sit down. She just bowed her head and said gently, "This servant came to pass on a message. I said that I will go back. There is still a pile of work to do in Ci Shao Garden." "But what is old madam's urgent order?" "Nanny, please tell me." Qin Yining looked at her seriously. Mammy Qin smiled and said, "Old madam said that today, all the girls will be excused from being muddle-headed. She asked you to learn the rules from Nanny Jean. Miss, please go to Xingning Garden to start learning in the early morning." Qin Yining nodded with a smile on his face, but he immediately understood in his heart. With such an excellent etiquette instructor, none of the branches would be able to endure it. After all, there were so many girls in the family. Although he didn't see it with his own eyes, Qin Yining guessed that Qin Huaining must have done something. With Qin Huaining's temperament, how could he allow such an excellent instructor to teach only Qin Yining? Mammy Qin saw that Qin Yining wasn't surprised and still had a dignified smile. It was like a soft spring under the sun, making people feel comfortable. The following words were even more gentle. "The teacher that Prime Minister invited for you has also arrived. I heard that he is an excellent scholar. He has been placed in the outer courtyard. Old madam said that in the future, Miss and the other girls will learn etiquette from Nanny Jean in the morning and study with the teacher in the afternoon." At this point, Mammy Qin's smile became more sincere. "It's really worth celebrating that Miss has been valued by old madam. It's all because of old madam's kindness and love. I'm very grateful. I will definitely study hard and live up to her expectations. Mammy Qin, please convey my gratitude to old madam. When I have time, I will go and kowtow to old madam to thank her." "Yes, this servant will definitely convey your words." Mammy Qin bowed again. Qin Yining and Mammy Qin exchanged pleasantries and sent her to the corridor. Unexpectedly, before Mammy Qin's foot landed on the ground, she saw Ci Shao Garden's head maidservant Ji Xiang and Ru Yi, along with other maidservants and older female servants, carrying a lot of things. Mammy Qin was very surprised. She came from Ci Shao Garden. What instructions did old madam have that couldn't be said in one breath? Were these things for Qin Yining? Ji Xiang and Ru Yi came forward and bowed to Qin Yining. Ji Xiang smiled and said, "This servant came at old madam's order. Just now, Nanny Jean said that although Quiz Huxuan is good, it's too cold and cheerless. Nanny Jean likes Miss from the bottom of her heart, so she specially asked old madam to allow her to live in Snow Pear Courtyard. Old madam and first madam have already agreed. These are Nanny Jean's things." As she spoke, she turned around and pointed to the bedding, pillows, and other daily necessities behind her. Another sturdy older female servant came forward with 2 loads of things. Inside, there were still clothes, rulers, quilts, charcoal baskets, and the like. Ru Yi smiled and said, replying to fourth young lady, "These were brought to you by old madam's order. Old madam said that the weather is cold, so you must wear warm clothes and don't catch a cold." Was this a kind of compensation for taking away her position as an etiquette instructor? Chapter 23. Yes, Mississippi. I'll definitely convey your message. Ru Yi and Ji Xiang bowed to Qin Yining with a smile. If Miss has no other orders, we'll leave now. Sisters, please. Qin Yining nodded with a smile. Mammy Qin also bowed to Qin Yining. Miss, I'll also leave now. I'll see Mammy out. Qin Yining gestured for her to leave and politely helped Mammy Qin down the steps. Miss, please stay. Mammy Qin declined politely, but she was very happy and had a better impression of Qin Yining. Even though Mammy Qin declined again and again, Qin Yining still politely saw her out of the yard. Mammy Qin bowed to Qin Yining again before leaving. Back in the yard, Qin Yining looked at the things that were about to pile up into a small hill. He said, "Record the things that old madam gave us. Put Mammy Jean in the wing room for the time being." Yes. Mama Zhu ordered the servants to tidy things up. Ruelan stood by Qin Yining's side and whispered, "Miss, it's strange. Yesterday, Nanny Jean came to teach you alone. Why did she change her mind after one night? Did First Madam approve of it?" Of course she did. Mammy Jean came because of the eldest branch. If First Madam didn't approve, Mammy Jean wouldn't agree no matter what others said. Ruelan was so angry that her face turned red. It doesn't make sense. They're bullying you. They're jealous of what you have and want to take away your things. Qin Yining comforted her with a smile. Don't be angry. Everything depends on human effort. Everything depends on human effort. Ruelan didn't understand what Qin Yining meant. Seeing that Qin Yining was going to return to the main room, Ruelan followed him and served him. However, when Ruelan passed by the wing room, she saw Zhu Mama carefully instructing the maid to clean the wing room and arrange Mammy Jean's things. She immediately understood. Nanny Jean was willing to accept the invitation to teach all the girls in the mansion and immediately moved back to Snow Pear Courtyard to live with Qin Yining. Didn't that explain the problem? On second thought, with how angry she was just now, could it be that the girl involved wouldn't be angry? But she was about to jump 3 feet high, but the girl was still calm. Her mind was clear, and she quickly analyzed the situation. She was really unfazed. Ruelan calmed down immediately. She suddenly had a thought, if I follow this girl in the future, I'll definitely be able to climb higher and higher. Time passed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was the 5th of October, the day to hand and the copied filial piety. In the past 2 days, she had been very busy with Qin Yining. In the morning, she would learn the rules from Nanny Jean with her sisters. In the afternoon, she would study poetry with the teacher in the outer study. In the evening, Nanny Jean would cook for her alone. In her free time, she would copy the book of filial piety. Qin Yining liked this kind of life very much. She was like a dry sponge suddenly thrown into water, tirelessly and quickly absorbing new knowledge. She worked seriously and had great perseverance. Because she had experienced more hardships, she didn't feel tired no matter how hard things like learning were. When other girls complained, she always maintained a cherishing attitude. She had a smart mind and almost a photographic memory. Coupled with her hard work and demeanor, in just 2 days, she won a better impression of Nanny Jean. Nanny Jean almost taught her everything she knew. In the past 2 days, when she was reading Laozi, she happened to see the sentence, "Misfortune is a blessing in disguise, a blessing in disguise." After analyzing her current situation, Qin Yining couldn't help but smile. Qin Yining took Ruelan and Qiu Lu to Xixiao Garden to pass out. As soon as she entered the courtyard, she saw the head maid Ru Yi in the corridor giving instructions to the little maids. When Ru Yi saw Qin Yining, she immediately greeted her with a smile. She curtsied and said, "Greetings to 4th Mississippi, greetings to older sister Ru Yi. Is the Dowager Madam well today? Did the breakfast taste good?" The Dowager Madam is very well. Huaning, 3rd Miss, 6th Miss, 7th Miss, and 8th Miss are all here. 4th Miss, please come in. As they spoke, they arrived at the corridor. Ru-yi personally lifted the warm curtain for Qin Yining. After entering the house, Qin Yining gave Raylan a newly made red cloak with white rabbit fur. She turned around and entered the house through the "Joy on Your Eyebrows" screen. The girls were either standing or sitting. Their postures were very relaxed. Qin Huaning was currently serving old Madam tea with an exquisite cup with a lid painted with gold. When she heard footsteps, she raised her head and saw Qin Yining in a white robe. Her pupils couldn't help but contract. She had a smile on her face as she said, "Younger sister Xiaoxi, you're here." When Qin Yining heard this, she felt very sick of it. It seemed that she didn't need to overestimate Qin Yining's character. Such a petty person would probably only use these methods. It was just a title. Didn't the children in the countryside who were called Goshing or Dondan still grow up? What was the point of always mentioning it? Qin Yining didn't feel like paying attention to Qin Yining. It was as if she didn't exist in the room. She properly paid her respects to the Dowager Madam. However, 8th Miss didn't like Qin Yining. She said mockingly, "It seems that Miss Huaning's memory is incurable. You can't even remember 4th sister's name." Qin Yining cursed 8th Miss for being an idiot in her heart. She dared to be impudent in front of the Dowager Madam. She was so angry that her face turned red. Her voice trembled as she said, "8th sister, what do you mean? You don't understand what I mean. It seems that Miss Huaning not only has a bad memory, but also a bad brain. Eldest uncle clearly said that 4th sister's maiden name is Yining, but you insist on not letting go of this title. You really are a petty person. You." Qin Yining was so angry that her eyes were filled with tears. She looked at the Dowager Madam for help. The Dowager Madam didn't like the sisters arguing in front of her. She said in a deep voice, "Bao, what are you saying?" 8th Miss still wanted to continue arguing with the Dowager Madam, but she was stopped by 3rd Miss and 7th Mississippi. 6th Miss winked at Qin Yining. She cast a sidelong glance at Qin Yining, who was kneeling on the ground to pay his respects. While they were arguing, Qin Yining had already paid her respects. However, because the Dowager Madam didn't say anything, Qin Yining also didn't get up. She knelt for a while longer for no reason. Qin Yining lowered her head so that others couldn't see her expression. She secretly curled her lips proudly. 6th Miss's face directly showed a smile. However, 8th Miss was a bit annoyed. The Dowager Madam also forgot for a moment. She didn't want to make things difficult for her. She glared at 8th Miss and said, "Sister E, get up." "Many thanks to the Dowager Madam." Qin Yining stood up and immediately received 8th Miss's apologetic smile. She knew that 8th Miss didn't mean it, so she also smiled back. Just at this time, a maidservant outside announced, "First Madam, 2nd Madam, and 3rd Madam have arrived." When the girls heard this, they all stood up and stood in order according to their seniority. Mammy Qin led the members of the Sun clan, 2nd Madam, and 3rd Madam in one after another. The Dowager Madam sat up straighter. After her daughter-in-law bowed to her, she smiled and ordered them to sit down. When Qin Yining saw that everyone had arrived, she immediately took a stack of paper from Bidong's hand. She held it in front of the Dowager Madam with both hands, bent her knees, and bowed her head. She said, "Dowager Madam, granddaughter is outspoken. A few days ago, I unintentionally made a mistake and caused discord in the family. This is the book of filial piety that granddaughter copied 10 times. Please have a look." When the Dowager Madam saw that Qin Yining was so respectful and polite, she took it and casually flipped through it. The handwriting on it was beautiful and neat. It was obvious that she had written it seriously. Yes. You wrote it well. The Dowager Madam looked at Qin Yining and said, Sister Yi, what about you? Granddaughter will order someone to bring it here. Qin Yining said and called out, Ruelan. Ruelan, who was outside, immediately responded and came in with a thick stack of paper. After she bowed to the master in the room, she put the stack of paper on the short table in front of the Dowager Madam. She bent down and casually picked up a few pieces of paper. When she saw the words on it, the Dowager Madam's face instantly darkened. This is what you copied. Qin Yining hurriedly said, Yes. Everyone was observing the Dowager Madam's expression. When they saw that she was so angry, they couldn't help but be curious. They all craned their necks to look at the words on the short table. When they saw it, everyone had different expressions. The Sun clan's faces instantly darkened. Second Madam and Third Madam were calmly fiddling with the patterns on their sleeves and clothes, as if they didn't see it. The sisters lowered their heads so their expressions couldn't be seen. Only the sixth young mistress actually burst out laughing and muttered in a low voice, Is this your handwriting? Why is it worse than a dog's crawl? When Second Madam heard this, she looked over in an extremely dignified manner. The sixth young mistress, who had been arrogant just a moment ago, was frightened and immediately shut up. The Dowager Madam held the stack of paper on her knees and put the words written by Qin Yining and Qin Huining next to each other. The contrast was even more obvious. She still hated the Sun clan for daring to quarrel with Qin Huayuan and then returning to her maternal family. She couldn't help but scold them. Sun clan, you should also supervise Sister Yi's homework. Look at what she wrote. Even if you put a cockroach in ink, it would still be more neat than her crawling. What a waste of so much paper and ink. The Sun clan's face alternated between red and white. She fiercely glared at Qin Yining, who had lowered his eyes and was silent. However, she wasn't convinced by the Dowager Madam and directly said, Dowager Madam's words are unreasonable. She has only been back for a few days. Even if her handwriting isn't good, it can't be blamed on me for not teaching her well. I had the intention to teach her, but unfortunately, the heavens didn't give us a chance to reunite. She hinted that it was because Qin Huayuan had offended her that they were separated. The Dowager Madam was so angry that she fell backwards. Thinking about it, this scene seemed to be déjà vu. When that servant named Yu Xiang came to complain, she had also reprimanded Qin Yining in a fit of anger. At that time, Qin Yining had politely agreed and protected the dignity of the Dowager Madam and the Sun clan. Now, as a mother, she dared to talk back to her face. She was actually not as open-minded as a little girl. Seeing that the atmosphere in the room had cooled down, Mammy Qin, who was serving on the side, looked at the paper that Qin Yining and Qin Huining had handed in and timely broke the silence in the room. The Dowager Madam punished the two young ladies to copy the classic of filial piety 10 times. Now that the two young ladies have handed it in, why don't we count the number? She added jokingly, let's see which one of them got lucky and wrote 1 or 2 fewer times. Chapter 24. Mammy Qin was cautious and steady in her actions. She wasn't someone who would casually sow discord. Everyone in the room knew that Mammy Qin only said this to tactfully divert everyone's attention so that old madam wouldn't feel awkward because of the Sun clan's words just now. When the Sun clan saw Mammy Qin leading Ji Xiang and Ru Yi to count, they smiled proudly as if they had won a battle. They felt extremely refreshed and leisurely sat down. However, Qin Huining was different. Although she used to be the most favored in front of old madam, Mammy Qin, this old servant, had always been respectful to her and wasn't intimate enough. She always acted in a way that others couldn't find fault with, but she was unwilling to get close to her. She had studied poetry since she was a child. How could she be a crafty person? It was impossible for her to secretly write one less page to be lazy. That kind of behavior was disdained by even children. It was fine that Mammy Chin suspected Chin eating like this, but she even included her. It was truly insulting to the extreme. Replying to old madam, this servant has finished counting. Ji Xiang rearranged the paper and secretly glanced at Chin eating with an obscure gaze. Old madam, this servant, Ru Yi, and Mammy Chin counted together. Miss Huining copied it 10 times, and Miss C copied it 30 times. When everyone heard this, their gazes landed on the 2 stacks of paper that were obviously of different thicknesses on the short table. In fact, everyone could see that the 2 stacks of paper were of different heights, but old madam didn't care. Others couldn't see the sizes of the words on Chin Yining's paper, so they just thought that her handwriting wasn't good and the sizes were different, wasting some paper. Who would have thought that when old madam asked her to copy 10 times as punishment, she actually copied it 30 times? Old madam was surprised as she flipped through the Book of Filial Piety, submitted by Chin Yining. Although the handwriting was ugly from beginning to end, it could be seen that there were no traces of ink stains on each piece of paper. Although his handwriting was ugly, his attitude was extremely serious. Old madam smiled and asked, "Sister Yi, I only punished you 10 times. Why did you copy it 30 times? Yes, I have the same question." Qin Huining also said, "I know that you have been studying with Nanny Zhan with your sisters these past few days, and you still have to study in the afternoon. Our time is equally tight, so how could you have copied 20 times more than me?" After Qin Huining finished speaking, he covered his mouth and laughed. The old madam was purely asking a question, but Qin Huining was hinting that Qin Yining might have cheated. This was something that everyone could hear. The 6th young lady smiled cooperatively. Miss 7 and Miss 8 were secretly angry. They glared at Qin Huining several times. Even the Sun clan looked at Qin Huining differently. The Sun clan was displeased in their hearts. After a few days of calming down, it wasn't difficult to see that Qin Huining was targeting Qin Yining. However, this was in the old madam's room, in front of the 2nd and 3rd branch. Now, there were only 2 people in the eldest branch, Qin Yining and Qin Huining. Qin Huining's behavior was truly disregarding the dignity of the eldest branch. Qin Yining blushed shyly. He slightly lowered his head and twisted his fingers. Today, she had combed her hair into a common bun. When she lowered her head, it naturally revealed her slender and fair neck. Coupled with her delicate posture when she stood up, she looked as delicate and beautiful as a swan. It made people who looked at her couldn't help but feel pity for her. Even her voice was somewhat timid. It was obvious that she was embarrassed as she said, replying to old madam, "Granddaughter didn't know how many times I wrote at first." Because of what happened that day, granddaughter was angry with old madam. "I was truly unfilial. Every time I copied a word, granddaughter would reflect on myself. Later on, I unknowingly became engrossed in it. In the end, I didn't notice how many times I copied. It was only last night when granddaughter's maidservant tidied up the room that I discovered that I had copied more than 40 times. Before coming, I took away those that were too ugly. Only these were left." At this point, Qin Yining quickly glanced at the old madam. Her face turned even redder. "Old madam, granddaughter has never studied since young. I'm good at chopping firewood, hunting, and collecting herbs in the mountains. However, it's really difficult for me to write. Even giving dog Schwan a piece of corn biscuit is better than me. I've wasted a lot of ink these past 2 days. I feel pity for those white papers." Pfft. As soon as Qin Yining finished speaking, a burst of laughter was heard. Looking in the direction of the sound, they saw that the old madam had already slapped her thigh and laughed loudly. Although the old madam was sometimes biased and liked to stir up trouble when handling matters, she was born in a noble family and had a good upbringing. The people around her hadn't seen the old madam laugh like this for many years. Recalling what Qin Yining said just now, they also couldn't help but laugh out loud. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room was so harmonious that it was as if the new year had passed. "You child. Come here, come to grandmother." The old madam wiped the tears from her laughter while pulling Qin Yining's hand and patting it. "How is it as unbearable as you said? You don't have the conditions to study. Otherwise, your writing wouldn't be worse than your sister's. It's hard for you to seriously reflect on yourself and write more than 40 times. No wonder I saw that you have dark circles under your eyes these past 2 days. Lu Juan." The old madam turned her head to look at Mammy Qin. Mammy Qin bowed to the old madam with a face full of smiles. "This servant is here. Go back and instruct the kitchen to send bird's nest porridge to the 4th young miss every day. I see that Sister Yi's body is too thin and weak. It seems like she will fall when the wind blows. She has suffered a lot these past few years. She should be well nourished." "Yes. This servant will definitely instruct the kitchen." At this moment, Qin Yining's face was no longer so red. However, when she heard the old madam say that she would send bird's nest porridge to her, she was flattered and looked up at the old madam. Her pair of almond-shaped eyes were covered with a layer of mist. Her eyes were pure and limpid like gemstones. For no reason, it made people think of a newborn kitten. It was so soft that people wanted to hold her in their arms and stroke her fur. The old madam did indeed do so. She held Qin Yining in her arms and patted her back. "Good child, don't be anxious. In the future, learn well from your master. Your handwriting will slowly improve. You don't have to feel that you are lacking compared to others. You are not allowed to compare yourself to a dog anymore. Do you understand?" Although she said this, she still couldn't help but feel that it was funny when she thought of the sentence, "Tie a piece of corn cake to the dog." Qin Yining leaned into the old madam's arms. Her nose was filled with the unique smell of the elderly. Together with the fragrance of cosmetics and smoke, it warmed people's hearts for no reason. She couldn't help but smile with her eyes curved. She nodded obediently and secretly sighed in relief. She didn't expect that the strategy of lacking in quality and making up in quantity was really feasible. Her hand that was almost broken from copying wasn't in vain. God knows how much effort she spent to make her face turn red when she was shy just now. Everyone looked at the scene of the old madam hugging Qin Yining. The eyes of those with shallow eye sockets, such as the 3rd young miss and the 8th young miss, couldn't help but turn red. Qin Yining's words just now inevitably evoked everyone's memories of her past. Even the members of the Sun clan, the 2nd old madam, and the 3rd old madam couldn't help but wipe the corners of their eyes with their handkerchiefs. For a child who had been lonely since childhood, it was already not easy for her to survive. Who could criticize her for her good handwriting when she held a brush? Moreover, this child was such an honest person. The Sun clan's dissatisfaction with Qin Yining causing her to lose face had been completely replaced by pity. Qin Huining, who saw all of this, almost gritted her teeth until they broke. She didn't expect that Mammy Qin's casual words would cause such a consequence. Why would the old madam laugh loudly at this person? The old madam was still hugging Qin Yining and even said that Qin Yining's body was weak and had to eat bird's nest every day. She didn't eat bird's nest every day in the past. When this savage beat people up, his fists were as hard as rocks and he was as strong as an ox. How did they see that her body was weak? She felt that her plan was completely wasted, because everyone had already forgotten about it. Qin Huining maintained a stiff smile on her face, but her eyes were like knives that pierced Qin Yining. She was indeed a scheming and cunning person. She pretended to be pitiful and played the role of a clown. In order to gain the old madam's favor, she was willing to do anything. She was simply shameless. Qin Huining cursed Qin Yining in her heart, and the smile on her face almost couldn't be maintained. When the Sun Clan turned around, she saw Qin Huining's stiff expression. She sighed helplessly in her heart. She could see Qin Huining's rejection of Qin Yining, and she could also see Qin Huining's uneasiness. She could understand the origin of her uneasiness. As a mother, she didn't know what to do other than comfort her. In the end, she was going to acknowledge Qin Yining. In these 2 days, she had carefully digested Duchess Ding's words. The Sun Clan only thought that she had given birth to another daughter. Could it be that if she raised another daughter, Qin Huining would still be like this? The more the Sun Clan thought about it, the more their faces darkened. Qin Huining was in a fit of anger, so she didn't notice the Sun Clan's and other people's expressions. She only thought that she was smiling as usual. But who in this room wasn't a shrewd person? The expressions of the mother and daughter fell into everyone's eyes. Each of them had a different thought. But all in all, now they clearly recognized Qin Yining's power. When she first entered the door, everyone could see old madam's rejection of her. But now, in just a few days, she had the ability to coax old madam into laughing like never before. She could also make old madam hug her and give her swallow's nest to nourish her body every day. Did old madam forget that when she violently beat up Qin Huining that day, 2 or 3 maidservants and older female servants couldn't take her down? However, at this moment, old madam was happy, so no one would touch bad luck for no reason. Mammy Qin saw that old madam handled things fairly and was so close to Qin Yining, so her smile deepened. Old madam. Just as the room was filled with laughter, a pleasing maidservant came in from outside. She saluted and replied, "Old madam, Duke Ding's heir's grandson is here. He's talking with the Prime Minister in the outer courtyard. He said that he wants to come in and greet old madam. Is old madam free here?" Old madam was delighted when she heard this. Yes, quickly invite him in. Yes. The maidservant retreated. Old madam then asked the Sun Clan, whose face was full of joy, "Why did your nephew come? Is Brother Meng on leave today?" Chapter 25. The Sun Clan was overjoyed and spoke beautifully. Not only did she praise her nephew, but she also praised her husband. Old madam loved her eldest son the most. How could she not be happy when she heard others praise him? She immediately said with pride, "Let's not talk about other things. Brother Meng, his talent and knowledge in court affairs are indisputable. Isn't it the result of old madam's teaching?" Third madam joined in the fun. Old madam was so happy that she could only show her teeth and not her eyes, but she also smiled proudly. Everyone seemed to be enlightened. One after another, they complimented Qin Huayuan and the grandson of Duke Ding. Even the Sun Clan felt very proud when they heard these people pouring out praise as if it was free. Old madam called Ji Xiang over with a face full of smiles. "Prepare good tea. This is an important guest. Don't neglect him." "Yes." Ji Xiang went to prepare with a smile. When the man was about to enter the inner residence, Qin Yining stood up first and said, "Old madam, since there are guests, why don't we sisters take our leave for now?" As she spoke, she looked at the sisters behind her inquiringly. Third Miss, 7th Miss, and 8th Miss all nodded. 6th Miss and Qin Huining were somewhat reluctant. Qin Huining was so anxious that her ears turned red. Qin Yining had been learning from Nanny Jean these days, so she observed people more carefully. At a glance, she could see that there was something wrong with the appearance of these 2 people. She couldn't help but have some doubts in her heart. Old madam thought for a moment and whispered a few words to her 3 daughters-in-law. Then she said, "No need. Your cousin is not an outsider. It's rare that such a talented person like him is willing to come. You should stay and meet him." Qin Yining smiled and said yes. However, she was very puzzled. How powerful was this cousin of Duke Ding's mansion? How could he be so loved by old madam? "Lu Juan, send someone to the outer courtyard to see if Brother Yu, Brother Han, Brother Xian, and the other masters are here. Tell them that the grandson of Duke Ding is here. Let them come and meet him together." She actually wanted to call her own grandson together. Mammy Qin smiled and left. Before she left, she didn't forget to steal a glance at First Madam's reaction. Old Madam's enthusiasm was enough to give First Madam face. Qin Yining had been standing beside the old madam with a smile. There was no doubt on his face, but he was even more puzzled in his heart. Once again, she discreetly swept her gaze across the people in the room. She saw Qin Huaining with her head lowered as she played with her skirt. Not to mention her ears, even her neck was completely red. Qin Yining couldn't help but raise his eyebrows in confusion. What was wrong with Qin Huaining? Since old madam didn't allow them to leave, but there were differences between men and women, it wasn't good for them to just stand there. Therefore, Third Madam made the decision and let the maidservants go to the inner chamber. She also ordered the maidservants to place a carved mahogany screen between the inner chamber and the outer chamber. Looking in from the outside, one could only vaguely see that there was someone in the room through the screen and the carved flowers on the floor cover, but they couldn't see clearly. However, if the maidservants in the inner chamber chose the right angle, they would be able to see the outside clearly. Although Qin Yining was curious, she wasn't in a hurry to see who it was. She chose a seat that wasn't too far away and sat down. She quietly chatted with 3rd young miss, 7th young miss, and 8th young miss. As soon as Qin Huaining entered the inner chamber, she immediately chose a seat that was closest to the outer chamber. As long as she tilted her head, she would be able to see everyone outside through the gaps in the carved flowers. 6th young miss sat down next to Qin Huaining and chatted with her in a low voice. From time to time, she would glance at Qin Yining and snicker. Seeing 6th young miss and Qin Huaining like this, Qin Yining naturally knew that they were making up stories about her. However, she never cared about what others said. In any case, she wouldn't lose a piece of meat because of this. Naturally, she didn't care about it and lowered her long eyelashes indifferently as she played with the teacup on the low table. Although Qin Yining didn't care, there were people who couldn't help it. 4th older sister, look at them. 8th young miss was a bit angry and fiercely glared at Qin Huaining. Qin Huaining indifferently looked back at 8th young miss as if she wasn't angry at all. Instead, she laughed even more heartily. The more she acted like this, the angrier 8th young miss became. She stood up and was just about to speak when Qin Yining grabbed her hand. 8th younger sister, do you remember what Mama Jean said yesterday? Qin Yining's voice contained a smile, but the strength of her hand wasn't small. Seeing that Qin Yining was quick to react, 3rd young miss finally let out a sigh of relief. She held on to 8th young miss' arm and had her sit next to her. She softly advised, 8th younger sister, please behave. This is old madam's inner chamber. There will be guests coming in later. If you really cause trouble, you'll be the one to suffer. It's fine if you're punished by old madam, but I'm afraid that you'll lose face in front of the guests. What if something bad were to spread? 8th young miss had a straightforward temper and was easily impulsive, but she wasn't stupid. Carefully recalling Qin Huaining's actions just now, she felt angry. She gnashed her teeth and said, she deliberately provoked me. Since you know, why does 8th younger sister still care? Qin Yining used a silver fork to fork a piece of fruit and handed it to 8th young miss. 8th young miss took it, but she didn't eat it because she was angry. 3rd young miss continued to persuade, you can't write 2 Qin characters with one stroke. In the end, we're a family. In the future, there will be a day when we go our separate ways. But if something really happens, the people who help each other are still the members of the same family. 8th young miss had always respected 3rd young miss, so she would listen to her words. However, she still felt angry in her heart and said in a low voice, "Who wants to help each other? They're such a vile person." 4th older sister's return won't hinder their business, but she always has a gun in her mouth. It's so boring. 8th younger sister, please don't be angry. I know that 8th younger sister is doing this for my own good. Chin Yining held 8th young miss's hand and shook it, indicating that she shouldn't be angry. 8th young miss looked at Chin Yining's eyes, which seemed to be able to speak, and felt that her irritation had calmed down a bit. Chin Huining rolled her eyes. She didn't expect Chin Yining to be so kind-hearted and know how to comfort others. 6th young miss coldly snorted and continued to whisper to Chin Huining in a low voice. Right at this moment, the sound of disorderly footsteps came from outside, followed by the respectful greetings of a maidservant. A group of men walked in one after another. When Chin Huining heard the sound, she pressed her whole body against the floor-to-ceiling screen and held her breath as she looked outside. 6th young miss also stretched her neck to look for a suitable position. 7th young miss and 8th young miss were also curious. They stood up and quietly walked to the screen to look outside. 3rd young miss and Chin Yining sat in their original positions and whispered to each other about needlework. In the outer room, the first person to enter was Chin Huayuan, who was wearing a silver-gray straight robe, with a smile on his face. The person who came hand in hand with him was a young man dressed in a sapphire blue robe with rui patterns. The young man was slender and had a long face. His face was fair and clear, and his eyes were like dots of paint. He had thick eyebrows and a high nose. He looked very spirited. Behind him were 1st Master Qin Yu, 2nd Master Qin Han, and 5th Master Qin Xian. Even 9th Master Qin Xian, who was slightly younger, and 10th Master Qin Rong, who was only 6 years old, were among them. The boys of the family Qin Bao Chito generation had never been so complete since Chin Yining returned home. "How have you been, Matriarch Qin?" "I, Sun Yu, pay my respects to Matriarch Qin." Sun Yu gracefully bowed, his posture elegant and calm. "Quickly get up, quickly get up." Matriarch Qin leaned over and supported him with both hands. "I haven't seen you for a long time. Your knowledge has improved a lot, right?" Sun Yu smiled, his bearing as gentle as jade. "Don't make fun of me, Matriarch Qin. I have to trouble Uncle to give me more advice on my studies this time. Quickly sit down and serve good tea." Matriarch Qin ordered someone to bring a chair. Sun Yu then turned and bowed to 1st Madam, 2nd Madam, and 3rd Madam. 1st Madam said with a smile, "Did you come directly from home? How is old Madam's health?" In reply to Aunt, grandmother's health has improved. Sun Yu said with a smile, "Aunt, don't worry. Grandmother specially instructed me to come here today to ask Matriarch Qin for help." Matriarch Qin said with a smile, "In-law is too polite. We are all relatives. Why are you so polite? If you have anything to say, just say it. As for you, it's rare for you to come to our house to play. In the future, you have to move around more often. You should also guide your cousins to make progress and strive to make progress like you. Matriarch Qin, you praise me too much. Yuan Ming is ashamed." Sun Yu bowed to Matriarch Qin again, took out an invitation from his sleeve, and handed it over. Then, he said, "My ancestors and grandmother knew that Uncle had found the long-lost pearl, so they specially instructed me to ask Matriarch Qin for a favor. They want to ask Aunt to take Cousin Yi back to Duke Ding's mansion. As her grandfather and grandmother, they also want to see their granddaughter." As soon as these words came out, everyone was a little surprised. They just wanted the Sun clan to take Qin Yining back to her maternal home and sent an old maid to inform the Sun clan. They didn't expect Duke Ding's mansion to be so grand that even Sun Yu, a great talent, became a special guest. Second Madam smiled gracefully. It's enough to show how much Duchess Ding cherishes her granddaughter. Yes, Sister Yi is smart, pleasant, gentle, and well-mannered. Not only does grandmother love her, but our matriarch also loves her as if she were her own flesh and blood. Third Madam also smiled. Thinking about what happened this morning, Matriarch Qin also felt that Qin Yining was very cute, so she joked lovingly. I dote on her so much. Originally, I couldn't bear to let her leave my side. But since my in-law misses her granddaughter so much, and even sent a talented scholar like Yuan Ming to persuade her, how could I not let her go? Speaking of this, she looked at the Sun clan. Eldest daughter-in-law, take Miss Yi back tomorrow and bring the things I prepared earlier to my in-law. What things did you prepare earlier? Instead, it was my Duke Ding's mansion that sent things to you. The Sun clan snorted disdainfully in their hearts, thinking that Matriarch Qin was too good at pretending. However, they smiled respectfully on the surface. Yes, I will follow your orders. Sun Yu smiled and bowed to Matriarch Qin. Because he was an outsider, it wasn't appropriate for him to stay in the inner residence for a long time. Sun Yu only sat for a moment and then followed Qin Huayuan and the family Qin brothers to the outer courtyard. As soon as he left, Qin Huaining climbed onto the arhat bed in the inner room, opened the window a crack, and looked outside. The cold wind poured into the room, and the girls all looked at the window. No matter how slow Qin Yining was, he could see some clues from Qin Huaining's unstable behavior. In the outer room, Matriarch Qin said, "Why is it suddenly so cold? Where did the wind come in?"